Good evening, everybody. We're going to call this meeting to order. I want to welcome everyone to the Brawley City Council meeting, successor agency to the Brawley Community Redevelopment Agency. This is our regular meeting agenda set here in the council chambers. Could we get the roll call, please?
The minutes will reflect all council members present.
Very good, thank you. And if we could please stand, I'll call upon Pastor Mike for the invocation.
Lord God, as we stand in your presence and in the presence of the citizens of our city and the leaders of our city, we ask for your guidance, your direction, and the direction of your Holy Spirit on all the businesses that are to be taking place today, the next day, and the days to come for the betterment of the living of our citizens in this city. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. If Mr. Lloyd Miller, Desert Review, can lead us in the pledge.
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Pastor Mike. We'll get moving here. First time here will be approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. I'll second.
We have a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, we'll go to our first agenda item of public appearances and comments. This is the period not exceed 4 minutes, and this is the time for the public to address the council on any items that are not appearing on the council agenda, and that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city council. The mayor will recognize you when you come to the microphone. Please state your name for the record. You are not allowed to make personal attacks on individuals or make comments which are slanderous or may invade an individual's personal privacy. Please direct your questions and comments to the city council. Would anyone like to come up at this time, make any comments, statements? That's not appearing on the agenda. Yes, ma'am, you can come on up.
Hi, my name is Cassie Hamlin. You guys may have heard about my girl. She was bit by a rattlesnake on Pano Street in Brawley. I am just asking for some signs to be put up and some repellent. My baby almost died from negligence of this hospital and the city. This is ridiculous. All I'm asking for is some signs along Pano and some repellent put out. One's already killed my dog. 6 months ago I found one. And my neighbor just got attacked like 2 weeks ago. One tried to get her. So this is 4 rattlesnakes in less than 6 months. I just need the city to do something. I'm putting repellent around my yard. Like, I can't keep everybody safe. People are walking through the field with their headphones on, not paying attention with their dogs. And I've seen 4 in 6 months. Come on, like something has to be changed. The street behind me, I've heard 3 people just got bit. Are we just gonna keep like putting a blind eye to this, or can we just let people know and do something about it? No one's wanting to do anything, and today I'd be burying my daughter. That is ridiculous. And PMH did not know how to handle a rattlesnake bite. PMH, I'm working with them because they did a lot of wrong, and they're working with me on trying to do patient care, rattlesnake care, and autism care. My daughter's 7-year-old autistic, and she was not treated very nicely. So I'm kind of putting up a front for that, because you're messing with my baby now. I'm not asking for much. I'm asking for some signs along Pano just to let everybody else know there are thousands of kids there that can get bit. And I see 7-year-olds riding their bikes, walking their dogs right there. And I'm like, oh my God, they're going to get bit. As soon as it happens again, it's going to get worse and worse. We got to put something up. I mean, do some research on it, look it up, call poison control, call toxicology departments. I've learned a whole lot about this from the last week, and me trying to tell people how to do it, they all look at me like I don't know what I'm saying. So it's doing no good for me to have the training and nobody else too. I know a lot about him, and I even went into the doctor. I told him exactly what to do. He refused to give me blood work for it because he didn't think she needed it. My baby when she went up to Rady's, they were refusing to give him the orders. They didn't know what they were doing. Something needs to be done here with rattlesnake care. So I'm asking the city, I want signs, I want repellent, I want stuff done. You need to let the people know in our area. You guys keep building more houses. What are you gonna do, just keep putting people in there? We gotta stop the snakes from coming up. I mean, I know it's the river bottom, but I lived there 7 years, I've never had this issue. So from what I was told is someone hit a den down there a few months back, and they're all coming up. So if that's what happened, then we need to put some repellent down. I mean, whatever the case was, it was a freak accident, but there's a lot of them, and it's gonna happen again. So I feel like asking for some signs to be posted and some repellent to be put down for the safety of the kids and people walking. It's not that much to ask. So all I'm asking is for some signs. PMH is already working on their part. They're trying to train their staff. All I'm needing here is some signs and repellent, just so that way people know. This is, my daughter's the first little girl to be bitten by a rattlesnake, so nobody has a clue. So that's all I'm asking.
No, I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
And I'm very nervous. I'm
doing
sorry.
that. No, you did it. No.
You got your message across.
Yep. Yep. Bring passion. Thank you
Thank you.
for that. Any other members of the public would like to come up for a comment? Questions? Seeing none. Very good. We'll move to under public comments. Quite an honor here, because this is certainly not something that happens on an everyday basis, much less annually, but we have the distinct honor of recognizing someone, and I'm going to call up Interim Fire Chief Mike York.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council, city staff, and members of the audience. Interim Fire Chief Mike York. It is my great pleasure and honor tonight to be presenting Captain Roger Smith. Please come forward, Roger. Roger started his employment with the city of Brawley in October of 1989, and he will be leaving us in December of this year, 2019. 30 years of service, 30 years of dedicated service. A few of the things, I spoke to some of our colleagues in the fire department, asked what they would like to say, and what came up overwhelmingly was the amount of experience that Roger brings to the department, as should be expected in 30 years of career. But it wasn't just the experience and knowledge of the fire service. Roger has a very unique encyclopedic mind about the city of Brawley. He can tell you where hydrants are at that nobody can see. Very, very useful. Another thing that just came up was in the fire service, we all have our little side trade, and it comes in handy. There's people that do construction, people that tile, and we often work in our station. Roger's certainly a jack of all trades. What really sticks out is Roger was our electrician for many years. If the switch flipped and nothing happened or the lights didn't turn on, Roger was the man to call. Show up with his tester and a crimper and get it fixed. And of course, I think I could speak for many in the back. Roger is well known for his unique sense of humor. And his cooking with his absolutely award-winning chili that the Brawley Firefighters Association used to win the chili cook-off in 2017 and 2018. So we have a plaque here tonight for Captain Smith, and I would read, it says, presented to Captain Roger Smith in appreciation of 30 years, October 1989 through December 2019, of dedicated service to the Brawley Fire Department and the residents of Brawley. Congratulations on your retirement. Roger, we do congratulate you. We thank you for your service, and we wish you many years of happiness in your retirement. Thank you, sir. You don't get to sit down next. This is the picture time.
Picture time or speech.
Captain, if you
have to
don't
do a
mind. Yeah,
speech,
sure. If
Roger.
anyone has,
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you.
The very unique and excellent coincidence tonight is that for the past several years, Roger's been assigned to C Shift. C Shift happens to be on duty, so please come on up.
come on up. Yeah. And
That's right.
Roger, Captain, if you don't mind, I'm going to put you by the microphone anyways, and we might have some council comments, and certainly want to take advantage of the photo moment. But this is really a moment to be celebrated.
Let the council address Roger first.
Yeah,
Let the council address Roger first.
sure,
then
sure.
we can get- yes.
And I'll open it up to council for.
Go ahead.
Captain, thank you for your years of service. It's firefighting is it's a dangerous but rewarding job, and I know most of what you do is medically related instead of fire, which is probably what you want to do. But it's an honor to have someone like you on the department, and we're going to miss you with your experience and your knowledge. And I hope that you've imparted a lot of that to the younger guys, because they're going to need it. But thanks for your service.
Thank you.
Yes, Roger, we've known each other a long time. even before I became a council member, and so you've always been there at the fire department. You've always been kind of a standard for the fire department, and we do appreciate that. I enjoyed seeing you in the parade this year with your family on the fire truck. That was really kind of a neat thing that you were able to do that, and we do appreciate your service, and we always have here in Brawley, and we look forward to seeing you. You know, we look forward to still having you around. Hopefully that'll continue, and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
Kevin Smith, thank you very much for the 30 years of service, commitment since 1989. You will be missed, and I certainly appreciate my interactions that I've had with you. They've always been professional and funny. We've always had a little laugh on things, and I've always had positive memories of you. So, and they've been limited interactions, but they've always been very good interactions. So I appreciate what you've done for the city of Brawley, for its citizens, and for your fellow firefighters and everybody in uniform. So thank you for everything that you've done. I congratulate you on 30 years, and I really do want you to enjoy your time away from work and enjoying it in retirement. So congratulations to you. Enjoy it. It's you've earned it.
Thank you.
So thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Captain Smith, my congratulations to you on 30 years of service with the city of Brawley. I know you will be missed. Unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity to interact with you very much, but I know that the 30 years that you've been on the force, that staff look up to you and learn from you, and so that truly will be missed. And I just hope that you decide to stay in Brawley and enjoy life and not worry about working, but still be there as a resource for kids that maybe want to pursue that type of career. And again, thank you, because I know that it's, and just watching all the fires that are ongoing, how dangerous a job it is, and how much you put your life at risk, and your family goes through a lot of that stress. So we do appreciate everything that firemen do, and especially you as a captain. Congratulations, and wish you a very happy retirement.
Thank you.
Wow. Captain, we were maybe chatting just very briefly, but everyone has a memory. I've been in the EMS industry actually for not near that long, but 12, actually going on 15 years. And I distinctly remember coming into the department on a professional level to provide training on how to utilize air ambulance helicopters. And the first thing that I always remember, and I certainly remember with you, is that for me it was always a bit intimidating, because I knew I had to really win the captain over in order really to communicate and have access not only to the shift, but to share obviously what those services are about, which for many that don't know, it wasn't very long ago this was not a service that was readily available, you know, in the valley. But as much as I felt that intimidation, it was your humor, it was kind of the willingness to kind of welcome in, and really Brawley from day one was one of the absolute most welcoming departments and early adopters to that service, which to me speaks to, really frankly, the entire department, your shift behind you. We're very proud of your service, very proud of what you've done. Many and all of us, actually, frankly, that sleep well at night because you and the men and women that wear the uniform stand guard night in, night out. So that is not something to be taken lightly, and to me, frankly, is why your profession and why you tonight, as we're celebrating you, 30 years of that is absolutely amazing. So with that, I heard there's a little procedural issue. The coveted, I want everyone in the public to know, 30 years, again, there's employees that move on and actually and move on to their retirement with far less years than that. You know, it comes down to eligibility, maybe personal matters on when they want to retire. So 30 years of service to actually earn the 30-year PIN, there's really not that many that achieve that. It's very few. And I do have, tonight, we pulled some strings. We'd like to present you with the 30-year PIN, so you don't have to actually, I think, normally wait a year or whatever it may be, or until next year. And I really appreciate actually Shirley and some staff, and that actually made that happen. So we'd like to present you with this, and I'm going to come down, and I'm not going to pin it on you. I'll let somebody more important do that. But and then as I do that, maybe we'll ask if council can join me. I think this will be a great photo, and let's send Captain Smith off in style.
And if maybe Rosanna has something to say? Or
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
Rosanna.
Thank you.
Captain Smith, wish you great health and happiness in the next chapter. You've been witness to many chapters in the city's history, and I think we can always learn from the past and take it into being smarter and better in the future. And I hope you can continue to share your knowledge, the importance of that knowledge not being lost. I think that's how we grow and evolve as a community and as an agency, is learning from where we've been and where we hope to land in the future. So wishing you the very best. Thank you for being generous with your public service.
Thank
We're
you.
going to miss you. And I have a feeling you're going to continue to be a very important part of the neighborhood
Hope so.
in Ridge Park, and continue to hopefully contribute in a very special way that's different from coming to work on a weekly basis, but really has its value in the city as a whole. So thank you so much. Enjoy the freedom. I'm excited
Thank you.
for you.
Thank you.
That's all good. That's a job.
Uh-oh.
This is not
Take a picture
staged.
quick.
Pictures.
Let's try.
We're part of this shit.
Let's see.
Need to go.
Good job, Coles.
Thank you guys for
Thank you, gentlemen.
Now you gotta come back. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Get in here, get in here. Squeeze in, everybody.
It's a family.
Just look this way, please.
Thanks. Thank you, thank you.
Congratulations.
No, wish me and Carol good.
Enjoy.
Thank you, I will.
Congratulations, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yep, I'll sit you around.
You know.
I'm not going anywhere.
No, no.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks. All right, thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
Good job calls, you know? It's like,
Yeah, that's duty.
duty calls.
That's important.
I think right there was a
Family.
unbelievably timed example, though, of
Yeah,
really
what
the life
happens,
in public safety.
They don't like getting in pictures anyway.
All right.
One last sweep for public comments or appearances. Seeing none, we'll move on. Next item will be item 2, scheduled presentation here. And this will be in reference to the Purego Brawley Draft Remedial Action Plan from November 13th, 2019 through December 17th.
Yes, thank you. And present this evening, we have representatives from the Department of Toxics and Substance Control, as well as Chevron and their consultant team. And what we're hoping to provide to the council and community this evening is an update on the preparation of the draft remedial action plan. At this point, I'd like to invite up the presenters for DTSC, as well as Chevron.
Thank you.
Hey, my name is Elsa Lopez, and I'm the Public Participation Specialist for DTSC. The project manager is out ill, so he sent me. So many of you already received the package that went out for public comment. Public comment started on November 13th, and it's going to go through December 17th. We actually blocked out the week of Thanksgiving to give an opportunity for an extended time on that. So in the plan, it includes actions based on community and city input. Do I just click it?
Alma, can you please help? Thank you.
Can you see?
Yes, thank you.
So based on community and city input, including the stockpile will be removed and creation of residential buffers. We've been working hard with the city and other stakeholders in doing that to protect the public health and the environment, and provides more technically required. So everything's been looked at, what's there, how it's going to be removed. Everything has to have the plan in place. Emphasis on safety, and will be implemented with detailed plans for dust control, most important, noise, and truck traffic. So in the plan, which is available here at City Hall, at the library, and at the DTSC office in Cypress. And you can also go on EnviroStore, and it has it there, and on the web page that's dedicated for that. In the proposed cleanup plan, it's to remove the stockpile for out-of-state disposal. It will not be going to your landfill. It will not be staying here. They're going to excavate other targeted soil for out-of-state disposal. Also, we understand that your landfill is pretty full, and it should go out of state. We're going to create a buffer zone inside the fenced eastern property boundary that is cleaned to residential level on that site by the other empty lot. Install a new fence, landscaping, sidewalk along the river drive. Today we were out there, we saw kids on bicycles, and some of the parents, when they saw what we had out there, were happy that there's going to be something where their kids can actually ride instead of just on the street. Place a protective engineered cover over the remaining property, long-term monitoring, maintenance, land use control. This is the rendition of what the conceptual view of what it would look like. That's that sidewalk where the parents said that they would like their kids to be riding on. There's going to be a bench there so the parents could sit down and watch the kids as they're going back and forth. Then we have the cleanup safety controls, which are common for all kinds of cleanups. Here, there's gone a little bit further. There's going to be air monitoring program, dust control plan, a health and safety plan, transportation plan. All trucks that go out will be covered completely to make sure nothing gets out into the environment. And there's going to be long-term monitoring and maintenance. So as time passes, there's still going to be the regular maintenance that goes on. If the fencing needs, repairs like it has in the past, that would all be taken care of, included in the plan. So the next steps, we start the public comment period on November 13th. It's going to go through the 17th. We'll have a community open house on December 5th. And then we'll go on to, in January, the RAP will be approved, response to comments, if there's any comments on there. In the first quarter, there'll be the removal of the stockpile. On the first and second quarter, design and reset of the remedy. Then on the third quarter of 2020, we'll begin the final remedial actions on there, covering it and everything. And then on 2021, begin long-term monitoring. So immediately, there's going to be, if maintenance has to be done, any monitoring that has to be done of the site will start immediately. And that's it.
Very good. Thank you for that presentation, Council. Any questions or comments? I think we were provided this back.
I think I would just like to comment that based on the community group meeting that we had, that all of the issues that were brought up have been addressed. And the community expressed the need to have all of this done, and it looks like all of them were addressed to what appears to be our satisfaction, and we'll see what the community has to say.
Yeah, we were out there today. I went door to door. People are happy that we're moving forward with everything. They are glad that everything was taken into consideration, everything is included, which is something that, it's a big victory for you guys to get.
I think one item that was brought up that obviously may not be considered, but one was, medical testing and those sorts of things in the neighborhood. So that's just one item that was brought up that I know isn't addressed. But overall, it's certainly addressing the stockpile and the concerns there.
Mayor Wharton, may I offer a couple comments? The Planning Commission had the chance to receive an update just in the last week. Some of the questions that arose that you may also be approached with questions related to the nature of the fencing that will be placed along the border on the east side. It will be a solid masonry wall. Because it is per city ordinance, a solid feature must be put in place between one zoning designation and another. And the area that's to the east of this property will be residential. It's currently zoned for residential. So I think that's an important item of note. And also one of the other concerns that came up just generally was being sure that regular maintenance occurs, both of the landscaping as well as if the fencing material on either of the sides is the object of graffiti, that Chevron continues to work actively on the maintenance of that and the aesthetic quality that is the end goal of the scenario. So this representation here today reflects the recommendations of the Center for Creative Land Recycling, who was hired at the city's request to help to identify certain community benefits, and we're appreciative of the chance to do something more than the minimum, which is, I think, what our starting point was. And we continue to work closely with DTSE and monitor the progress of this particular effort. And I'm sure we'll also be part of the outward communication strategy. Once cleanup starts and the stockpile removes, there will be a lot of traffic-related impacts. So the victory is the removal of the stockpile, but there will be impacts along the way once that removal begins. And hopefully the minor or the inconvenience of truck traffic will be worth the effort and the end product of having it removed from premises.
Very good. No other questions or comments? No.
I just wanted to contribute. I'm Julia Bussey. I'm with Chevron. And I just wanted to reaffirm that we're committed to working through this entire process and getting the stockpile out of there as quickly as we can, given that, we have to go through the public hearing process. So.
Very good.
Thank you.
We appreciate
Any
it.
questions?
Thank you.
Yes, Pastor, come on.
Just a few questions to the Chevron representatives. The road that is painted here, is that running north-south on the eastern end of the property?
No.
No,
there's-
east-west.
East-west
It's
on
River Drive.
River is the southern boundary of the property, River Drive, and no roads are currently contemplated that run north-south.
Okay, so that's River
That's River.
Drive?
That's already there, yeah.
Okay. And what is going to have the sidewalk, and then how many feet is that planted area between the sidewalk and the bike?
Yeah, I believe it's a 50-foot setback from the city street.
Now, the fence, how tall will it be?
Maximum of 6 feet in height.
Because of what it is, wouldn't it be wiser to put maybe even a higher fence than that to,
The remedy that is proposed in the draft cleans up the site to residential standard in some portion of the property and light industrial in the remainder, and in and of itself is described by DTSE as not a risk to the public.
Now, the soil that will be removed, what is it, just the pile that's there, or will they dig deeper?
I think it would be helpful to get a bit of a technical explanation on both the buffer area as well as the vast majority of the parcel.
Okay, so there's sort of two parts to this. The first part is the stockpile that we talked about. The second part is that we will be removing the contaminated soil down to 4 feet to a level of industrial commercial standards. So there will be excavation of materials. There will also be, along the eastern portion, there will be some removal of materials so that there's a buffer zone, a residential level buffer zone, and that's along the eastern part of the
inside of the fence?
It will be on the inside of the fence. It will be between the inside of that fence, on the inside of the fence, on the side of the property where there will be residential houses built. Yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
and then
And-
also,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
So to just follow up, and then after that excavation is completed, there will be some kind of clean fill put down and gravel, so that it tops off at a foot. So there'll actually be a total of essentially 5 feet of material that will be cleaned to industrial commercial standards. And the purpose of the gravel is to hold down the dust and to prevent the dust from infiltrating, and also to allow a place for rainwater, to the extent that it occurs, to gather safely without having a lot of runoff.
What about, would there be any kind of metering so far as the?
Pastor Mike, the only thing, just out of respect, I just want, December 5th is actually the community open house, but we can do that, but I want to just make it clear for the public, this wasn't meant to necessarily be a public hearing, it was a presentation, kind of an update, but I think all these questions are absolutely encouraged, both in writing as well as in person at the community, I think, scheduled meeting, but just, that's all. I just want to make sure that you had an opportunity also coming up, as well as the public.
And to just follow up
Yeah.
also, we have, all of this information is available online at DTSC's website and on the Brawley website. And in addition, there's a public comment period extends all the way to December 17th. As Elsa pointed out from DTSC, it's longer than usual just to allow for Thanksgiving. At the public meeting, we will have posters and people to answer questions. And we'll have bilingual services also at that point. So, and we'd be happy to sort of take this offline so that the city council can keep going and answer more questions.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
So we're done?
Oh, no, yeah, no, I appreciate that. Appreciate the presentation update and the questions, Pastor Mike. I just want to make it clear so that the public understood also. Those opportunities are definitely scheduled and ready. Without any further on that item, we'll go to the next item, item 3, which is the consent agenda. These items are approved in one motion. Council members and members of the public may request these items to be considered separately at a time determined by the mayor. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent as written.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, we'll move to our next item, item 4, which will be a public hearing. This is a public hearing for a discussion and potential action on the climate action plan associated with the general plan amendments, infill strategies, and negative declaration. Backup materials, which are quite extensive, are in pages 64 through 277. And we have Gordon.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, Gordon Gase, Development Services Director. Yes, it is quite extensive. I'll try to keep this brief and then let you have any questions at the end. The climate policies from California, they started even before they required a climate action plan. In our last general update back in 2008, they did require certain climate-related policies and goals to be, implemented with that general plan. After that, they made a new requirement that we need to have a separate climate action plan. That this is just an elaboration of those policies that are already in the general plan. Most of this plan, if you look, it's not as much, really the policies and goals. It's statistics to give us a baseline for the policy and goals that are listed in there. And most of the things we since 2008, we've been doing these things. We've been trying to do these things, these type of policies of, encouraging recycling, or anything from replacing traditional lighting with LED lighting, water conservation, xeriscaping, our urban water management plan, adding hybrid vehicles to the city's fleet, adding more sidewalks to make it a more walkable community and bike lanes, infill construction, which we highly encourage and is actually happening at the fastest pace since I've been here, especially on the northeast side of town. Also, the only things that really are mandatory are any of the state requirements, like any of the change in the California Building Code. Obviously, we got to follow those things. And as some of you probably heard that, starting in January, there's a solar requirement, there's a smart attic requirement, there's extra insulation requirements. Those are all part of the building code, which, we don't really have a choice but to follow. By their studies, it's going to show that these new houses will, decrease their energy factor by 41%. So it does eventually pay for itself, but it's an upfront cost that can be a burden to some of the lower income citizens, unfortunately. This is a fluid document, a living document, just like any of our other plans. It's not etched in stone. It can always be amended. There are no ordinances that are related to this, so none of it is really mandatory, like I said, except for the state requirements. It's just, something that we, want to promote to make the community as green as we can. So just to emphasize this, if something is not, a reasonable, it doesn't, we'll evaluate these by each project, and if it's not a reasonable, applicable policy that applies to that type of project, you don't have to do it. Or if it's something that is, financially not feasible, you don't have to do it. If it doesn't make sense to do it over, to save money over a period of time, it just kind of, it's a wash. So you don't have to do any of these things. This is just a guidance document that, promotes green building and green living, basically, which is what the state wants. So.
Very good. Do we have
So approval of this document this evening will help to make us eligible for future funding opportunities. It is a critical piece of our funding eligibility for future pursuits. Want to also note that a countywide climate action plan is also in progress, and as a result of that effort, there will be individual jurisdictions that are compiled into a master document for the region. So by taking action on this document tonight, it does have the city actually participating in a formal way in the regional strategy that is defined.
Right. And those, like I said, that's good times that we can find if there's any updates that we need. And like I said, like the city manager said, it can give us some points on some of the grants we apply for the actual implementation, like when we, get sidewalk, type grants and bicycle lane grants. So it doesn't hurt to have. Like I said, it's not something, like I said, that's overly strict. It's just a guidance document.
Sure.
Very good. What I'll do in this order is, if council has any questions or comments, I'll hold on that. I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing, which I guess when I moved to that item I did, but I just want to make sure the public's aware. Public hearing's open. You can come up. Please state your name for the record. Any questions or comments? And we have Gordon up here, staff, in case there's any questions. I don't see anyone rushing up here.
And we circulated this through state agencies and locally also, and we had no comments during the comment period.
Okay, very good. I do not see anybody headed this way. Thank you, Gordon, for that. So at this time, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and I'll turn to council in case there's any questions or comments on the plan. Seeing none there. All right, we'll move forward to the next step, which will be action. So do we have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve the item is presented.
All right. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Call for the question here. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Thank you very much. We'll move to item 5, regular business, and that'll be 5A.
Thanks, Gordon.
Be discussion and potential action to approve submittal of an SB2 planning grant application to the State Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, on behalf of the City of Brawley. And I think we have Gordon here, backup materials on page 280 through 283.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, council members, this is a grant to, our housing element will be required to be updated in 2021. It usually takes about a year and a half to perform all the work for this. So we'll be starting most likely in late spring, early summer. I believe it has to be adopted by October of 2021. This grant, unfortunately, doesn't provide money for the element itself. However, it provides for money for all of the supplemental and backup studies. And associated changes to the general plan of the other elements and also the zoning ordinance, especially in terms of updating our second dwelling unit ordinance, which has changed since our last ordinance update, and also the density bonus section. And this takes care of a lot of the legwork that the consultant would do with this grant to, gather all the statistics that we need to actually perform the housing element portion itself. That I'm already working on another grant to actually do, a grant that is eligible to actually do the housing element to finish that off, which will be coming up in a couple of months. So this is the beginning. This is just a resolution to, that we need to apply for the grant. These grants are, non-competitive. Hopefully we will get it. If we do, like I said, this is a head start for us in gathering all the information that we need for the actual housing element. And like I said, the work would probably start sometime as soon as late spring or early summer of next year.
Very good. 160,000 is a good-sized grant. Open to council. Any questions or comments on that? If not, I think it's pretty straightforward. Go ahead.
No, I don't have any
Okay.
questions. Good.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, very good. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Regular business, we'll move to item B. This will be discussion and staff direction. This will be for the assumptions for the general fund budget for fiscal year 2019-2020. I believe,
Just a note on that prior item.
Yep.
The housing element update is supposed to be adopted by October 2021, so, this is government for you. It takes a while for
Wow.
things to, you know what I mean? Just,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another one here somewhere?
Is there another one?
Is that it?
Three handouts.
Yeah.
Long page, a short page, and then the,
Is there another,
You have another.
long page?
you need a short?
Big page, one staple.
is there
then
another
a
long
short
page?
one.
There's only 4 here.
Only 4 long pages.
That's the same in its
I think that's the same as this one. and then-
Is this the same?
We have some more.
Oh, okay. Well, this is the same, then that's fine. I don't care.
What?
Is this?
I don't know.
No, it's,
Everybody
yeah, it
get,
is.
everybody get one?
It's
It's
just
the same as the big one?
Yeah, thank you.
Did you need one, another one?
Make it a
good.
little easier to read.
What's the other form? What was the
Don't
other
touch.
form? What was the other form? I'll touch all I want. I don't have the full package at all. We're supposed to have a package with handout with a.
You
with the
should have a
slides?
stapled version of the slides. And then one very enlarged worksheet and one that's on an 8.5 by 11 that's just a little bit
Is that the
harder
stapled one?
to track.
There we got it.
Okay, wonderful. So good evening. We are back at it, working toward the goal of adopting our general fund budget. As council was recently updated on where we stand with the audit process, our Our 17-18 audit is complete, has been accepted by the City Council, and now we are ready to proceed in sequential order with the overall budget. Would like to note that, obviously we are 5 months behind schedule. There are a number of reasons for why that took place. Probably the most significant are experience with some staffing changes in the finance department for the year and delays in year 2 of audit implementation with our auditing team. So be that as it may, we find ourselves in the position of being underway in a fiscal year with a continuing resolution in place for expenditures that have occurred from July 1 to present. So the goal for today's item prepared for council's review is really what intends to be a temperature check. At the next city council meeting, our goal is to present a final budget for adoption. And because there are some very significant trade-offs in play to achieve balance, it's extremely important that we check in with the council to understand if where we're headed is consistent with where the council wants to be at the close of June 30, 2020. So our collective values and goals as the finance department and various city departments have worked to prepare estimates has a focus on fiscal prudence, with the end goal of the solvency of the agency. And in order to get there, we're going to have a very tough road through June 30, 2020 that will require us to tighten belts and take some significant measures to end in the black. So as was shared at the last update, we have concluded our collective bargaining. We've completed the audit. We're in month 5 of 12. And at the close of 2018, per the audit, we have $671,653 in the reserve. We anticipate at the close of June 30, yet to be audited, June 30, 2019, our year-end closing show us at $689,588. So what have we done with the realities of our financial position? A number of one-on-one meetings have taken place with departments. The city has held strategic planning and budget workshops. And following those workshops and recognition of the shortfalls that would be necessary to maintain the same service levels, we again visited with departments and requested 10% in additional cuts across the board. And in some places that can be achieved, but in others where we have a department or a function of one, the only way to continue is either eliminate the function of one or accept it as a cost of doing business and proceed to areas where there is the ability to work with various line items. Council is also aware that we continue to navigate the waters of the Flores versus San Gabriel decision, and the budget values that were built into the expenditures to date do require us to address back wages owed as a result of Flores versus San Gabriel in the sums listed. And so as a result of this decision and the city's need to think differently about the cash in lieu of benefit, it was necessary to schedule and assume one-time payouts that will clear the exposure that we have for the past. As the city is aware, we have two pending lawsuits. To date, those lawsuits have cost us $86,000 in legal fees. And so expenses incurred in this fiscal year include the $86,000 to date. As we've gone through this process of building budget assumptions, tracking and ensuring that our revenue projections are reasonable and can be supported by the facts with past payments and updated and anticipated projections, we found ourselves at the gap of $1.3 million. And the particular challenge that we face is that in order to bridge that distance of $1.3 million, we really have to make significant changes in a 6 to 7 month remaining period in order to still live within the dollars that we have available from a revenue standpoint. So what I'm going to walk through with you are how we got from $1.3 million to today's gap. Today's gap still has a solve that's needed for $396,000. As I move through the next slides and describe the significant belt tightening that has to occur between now and June 30, please keep in mind that in spite of some very significant measures being undertaken, we're still in need of addressing $400,000 in additional cuts. And we're hoping to get some feedback from the council on what your appetite is for changes in service levels. And we'll do our very best as staff to see how we can guide a policy discussion that has to do with the allocation of scarce resources, because all of the features that we deliver as a city have significance to the public we serve. It's just we're fiscally constrained. So we have to make some decisions about what changes in service level we can tolerate as a city. So we have undertaken best efforts toward revenue generating commercial development. As I've shared with you in recent months, the level of activity has really increased in some of the key corridors with a number of preliminary development plans at the table with development services. And, you know, we've got great optimism about the future. Sometimes it takes time for these developments to come online, so our ability to realize their potential in the fiscal year is limited. Our goal is to accomplish revenue and expenditure alignment, and even as I looked past at the past 8 years, I came on in 2011, I pulled the budget memo from the 11-12 fiscal year. At that time in 11-12, we were we had a balanced budget in that we had enough revenues and reserve to address expenditures, but the operational revenues and operational expenditures were off by $1.13 million. So we're not far off as we were in 2011, although we've shrunk considerably. And I think the most important thing to note is that during that time, we've depleted our general fund reserve, trying to keep these service levels as high as we possibly could and best utilize our resources. So the intent in some of the assumptions that you're going to see in a few moments have to do with leaning the organization, continuing to reduce in size so that we can live within our financial means. We have assumed the elimination of elective membership contributions. In the last couple of fiscal years, we've actually trimmed the number of organizations we've elected to contribute to, but in this figure that has been presented to you tonight with a $396,000 gap, it does not assume a contribution this year to Imperial Valley Economic Development Corporation, to the Imperial County Film Commission, nor the Chamber of Commerce. And that amounts to a total of $20,000. But I know that particular topic does come up in every single budget cycle, and thought it was worthy of mention in terms of assumptions on the go forward. There is going to be a need to adjust our service levels to reductions. it is humanly not possible to continue to provide the service levels that have been provided in the past with many fewer bodies. And in recent years, we have kind of adapted to a desire for a higher service level with many temp solutions in play. But as a result of that, we have continued for a number of reasons to deplete the general fund reserve. So at this point, seeing the diminished general fund reserve and knowing what we have as ongoing exposure on a couple of fronts, the time is now to take some action and change service levels so that the agency can continue in some fashion to provide services in the future without becoming insolvent. Our goal as staff is to identify an approach to rebuilding the general fund reserve. This body has in former years taken very significant action towards establishing a policy goal for reserve, which is 15% of expenditures, and for the last number of years we have been unable to maintain that due to the desire to maintain consistent service levels. Okay, so what I have here, what I was hoping to do in this slide is share with you the big picture as to how the general fund is carved into pieces in various services. So what is featured on this slide collapses, let's say for instance, the fire department has a Station 1 and Station 2 line item in our budget. We combine Fire Station 1 and 2 to reflect a total value. The Development Services Department is presented with planning, building, and community development. It is shown as a combined number as well. And I think one of the exercises we've gone through as staff is to kind of better appreciate when you look at how the pie of finite resources is rationed. What you see is we've got about 62% of the budget is devoted to public safety, and approximately 12.5% or so, 13 if you round upward, is devoted to parks and recreation and the library. I do want to note, and you'll see further detail in your handouts, that the line items that are associated with finance, which is both finance administration and utility billing, that is 100% recovered by special funds. And the same is the case for engineering. So while those dollar values are shown as a charge to the general fund of $957,317 and $783,758, those two combined values are fully recovered through our cost allocation plan and capital projects that are undertaken to build certain improvements in the city. So our approach to this process has been to try to prioritize and balance services. As noted, we're still 400,000 short, so better understanding where the council would like to see higher prioritization would be helpful as we prepare the final budget. I'm also have been working with the finance department and various city departments to translate how these changes in budget will affect service levels available. And what is referenced in the next slides are going to show a department by department breakdown, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions along the way. So one of the first things that we did was take a look at temporary staffing, because some of the cuts later in the presentation make reference to permanent staffing. The approach at this time has been to eliminate temporary staffing across a number of city departments. And you'll see, I'll give you the specifics of each of those in a few moments. But included in the assumptions in this budget is the elimination of temporary staffing for code enforcement, graffiti abatement, and parks and recreation. Our assumptions are beginning January for the majority of those cuts. The fourth point that I'd like to make reference to is with reference to relinquishment funds. And this was a topic that arose at a prior presentation to the council. The city is in receipt of relinquishment funds that started out as a $9 million sum. That is based on Main Street related work or right-of-way and North 8th Street, Old Highway 111 related right-of-way. And in general, it was a proportional share that would be described as $6.5 million for Main Street and $2.5 million for North 8th Street. And since we received those funds, we have undertaken two specific efforts. One is the very visible North 8th Street overlay project, and the other is the traffic signalization repair work at Cesar Chavez and Main Street. And those final dollar values are not yet complete for either of those two projects, but in general, I think it would be a good figure to imagine that the $9 million principal sum has been reduced by about $1.1 million. So a question that, or a comment that arose at a prior meeting was, what have we gained as interest earnings on that principal sum? Our most recent calculations indicate about $450,000. So I have that note here on the slide. Okay, so I know these next slides are probably going to be a little difficult to stomach, but wish to walk you through what is proposed as the assumptions to get us in revenue and expenditure alignment. For the city clerk's office, this building, we have 4 people in the building, and we've got a part-time temporary maintenance worker. We are proposing elimination of the temporary staffing. And while this may restrict the ability to attend outside meetings, because we're always working with at least 2 individuals in the office. So if you happen to have a person who's out on a doctor's appointment or otherwise not at work, we do a little bit of a shuffle. So I'm going to walk you through each of these changes that if they're implemented, what their impact are. This particular topic arose in the last budget cycle. At that time, we described that janitorial duties would be divided amongst staff in this building, and we would continue to have open hours in the building as long as we have coverage with minimum staffing.
And how much does that save us?
I can give you individual breakdowns, but it's going to give them we didn't prepare it by number individual entries because they're service related. There's many dimensions to it, but I can work with you to give you those specific numbers. There's going to be a long list.
I think I'll need the specific numbers.
Sure.
Before I make a decision, at least from my side.
So for personnel, we've got a department of 1. For personnel with a staff of 1, we are proposing to replace the employee appreciation luncheon with a pin ceremony, as opposed to holding an event that the city budgets for. For development services, we are proposing elimination of the temporary part-time code enforcement officer, and the duties currently undertaken by the code enforcement officer would be absorbed by the development services staff. And a recently received building inspector retirement, which is expected at the end of this calendar year. We are proposing no backfill of that vacant position. So the
Lieutenant,
impact,
just a question. Do
Yes.
we have more than one building inspector? I
yes,
don't-
we do. We
maybe
have
I
a
should
building,
know.
interim building official and 2 building
Two
inspectors.
building inspectors, okay.
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 So
Just wanted
after
to
the
know.
retiree, we would still have 2?
Correct, an interim building official and a building inspector.
Okay.
So what we expect is potentially increased turnaround times for inspections, but probably the biggest area of delay would be in plan check reviews. And one of the things that we do as a city is perform a great deal of in-house review. And when that in-house review occurs, we actually don't charge based on the number of submittals that come in the door. But when you use an outside plan checker, we pass on the cost to the developer. So the use of an outside reviewer will definitely have an impact on a developer's cost incurred because we'll no longer be performing some of that work in-house.
I do notice that we get more requests for rapid turnaround times for inspections. This would have an impact on that, I'm assuming in some way. I don't know how much of an impact.
So our typical turnaround time is 24 hours. So you call in for inspection a day prior and next day.
Just pretty rapid. One quick question. With respect to the vacancy due to retirement, is there any idea of when that would occur, the retirement?
Yes, we are in receipt of retirement papers, and we are expecting that spot to be vacated December of 2019.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good
Were
point.
you able to pull the figure for?
Makes a difference, I
Yeah.
guess.
It's about, for the janitorial
Yes,
position, it's about 8,400 for the 6 months.
That's for the temporary, that's
Yes.
this for this building, not
Yes.
for the
Well,
other
He
half.
is shared.
He's shared among all
Not
police
all,
and
but
here,
other
right?
places.
Right.
Right?
So the savings would be for.
But it's all, this is the general fund savings for him.
Right.
8,400.
The general fund savings for him.
We're talking about
With him
He
being in
basically
both
is 100%
places.
in the general fund.
Okay, okay. Okay.
And then, let's see. And if you'd like to cross-check, I just am thinking it could be helpful to you. As you look at this enlarged sheet, you'll see each of the headings by department at the top. So what you can see is how the values have changed from our last council update to now, what we have reduced values to have been accomplished as changes. So for instance, if you look at personnel and you look at services, in the cycle that occurred from November 5th to now, we have found ourselves reduced by about $14,000. And that wasn't only the employee appreciation event, it was also other line items. If we thought we could reduce and still finish in the black, the goal's realistic projections, but not if there's a chance to save, that we reduce by a corresponding number. Okay, and for development services, when you cross-check development services, you're going to look at both planning, community development, and building. Okay, so you can see the changes accomplished for building inspections. We achieved about 59,000. Excuse me. Yeah, that's right. 59. Yeah, $59,000 in employee compensation by not backfilling. We also reduced in supplies and materials as well as services.
Okay.
Okay? Okay, in the library, we did sit at length to review library-related changes. There is a page position proposed for elimination. The 10% target was met. The impact on service levels will be reducing the number of days a week that the main branch is open by 1 day. And as a result of lower level staffing required for the Del Rio branch, we're able to add 4 hours per week to the Del Rio branch. But in exchange, we lose 1 day per week at the main branch. Okay, Parks and Recreation. This is probably the most difficult to understand in total. Many strategies have been employed in the Parks and Rec Department to meet public demand for services and a desire to have enough staffing in place to actually accomplish the robust programming that's a part of the services that we offer. As a result of that, we have created a number of patches to vacated permanent slots that were eliminated in prior budget years. And because there was a concern for the general fund's ability to cover permanent staffing, temporary staffing instead was put in play. So what is included in the assumptions for the budget we're preparing include elimination of the temp senior center coordinator, the teen center coordinator function, the Parks and Rec admin secretary, and 2.5 maintenance worker positions. These are anticipated to have very significant impacts on our service levels. And I think when I get to the public safety slides, you'll understand why so many of these cuts are necessary as measures to offset what will be impacts on in the public safety realm. So various temp support roles are proposed for elimination. We'll no longer have open senior center hours, open teen center hours. We'll have delayed maintenance activities throughout the city. Our ability to do field prep to support leagues that are high maintenance obligations are proposed for elimination this fiscal year. Those include the Girls Softball League and the Adult Softball League. We do have some numbers that the department is prepared to review if the council wants to talk about how we might approach cost recovery in a different way on that front, but obviously imposing higher fees is a difficult pill for our user groups to swallow. We are also proposing, now that cattle call is behind us, that the special events that pop up from now to June 30, that those not be offered. And the reason is that typically we rely on either overtime or the use of temporary staff to augment those staffing needs. And examples would be, for instance, the tree lighting ceremony, which was brought back a few years ago. Any evening or outside a normal business hour event that did not already get programmed in the budget would not be something that we have the financial resources to perform. Parks and Rec is also looking to proposing, if their resources are limited, to reduce the number of splash pad days with either a later rollout or an earlier finish to the days of use. And probably one of the biggest day-to-day operational changes, aside from lawn mowing, which is significant, is that regular staffing in the Parks and Rec office at the Lions Center, where 5 days a week, they're open 8 to 5 and closed for the lunch hour. Instead of having a live person there, we would be using basically a voicemail system to retrieve messages when our single recreation coordinator is not in the office to answer calls.
Is there, or then just similar to what Sam asked a little bit earlier, is there, for us, for directional purposes, is there a round number of what all of those, what that savings realized would be of all those changes?
Absolutely. So in the parks realm, so this would be how we mow, how we maintain needs in parks. It's a difference of approximately $82,000 for 6 months of the year. If you look at the line item that pertains to recreation and the Lions Center, those get bundled. It's more like the pool and the Lions Center large meeting space. That's the way this cost center is organized. The difference is about $35,000. And then for the senior center, the difference between staying the course and changing is about $20,000.
Okay. Just a question to add to that. Does the pool And the Lions Center also include the cost for the splash pad, or is that separate?
Everything is bundled in the proposal, and I'm sorry, I just realized that I did not hit the pool item. What is proposed is elimination of winter heating of the Lions Center pool, no lap swim, and delayed plaster replacement. And as I drilled down on what prompted this particular feature to be highlighted, it's the number of users and the cost of operation. So with each year, our number of days of heating have increased, but the revenues collected from lap swim, if I can have Marjo just for a moment do a quick recap of those numbers, I think it would be helpful.
Sure. During the year, there's usually between 5 and 20 people actually using the lap swim. Current charges are $2 per day or $50 for a 3-month pass. Having 2 lifeguards for the time that's needed is $75 per day, 5 days a week. And for 5 to 20 people, it was looked at as not something that necessarily would be supportable. And the other thing about trying to cut the heating in the winter is also because of the amount of the gas spill.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Question.
Yes.
On the teen center, there was a plan that you had discussed with me, and I don't know if you discussed it with the other council members, regarding someone maybe taking over that facility and possibly having some relief in that area. Would that still go forward as it relates to these cuts? And since they would be taking over, would they incur some of those costs and we would not have to incur them? And that's the question.
Okay, so the current status of those discussions, just today, the Parks and Rec Commission met and had as an invited guest, local nonprofit, Imperial Valley Boys and Girls Club. We had an opportunity to hear some more about their plans for use of a larger portion of the teen center. There are still a lot of details that are yet to work through. The Parks and Rec Commission had a chance to better understand if the city's confronting elimination of open hours drop-in, having a primary user could be beneficial to keeping some level of programming in place. I think it would be fair to also note at this juncture, the Boys and Girls Club is not proposing to pay rent or offset any utility expenses.
Got all that.
So covering their cost or paying rent isn't a part of the current discussions, but discussions are ongoing. So.
All right. Well, it's something.
So there's
to
no
discuss.
revenue there, in other words?
Something to
Correct.
discuss. There may be a reduction in our revenue for any personnel, but the rest of it we would have to cover. In other words, our personnel cost may be reduced, but our operational costs would not.
Correct.
Got that. Okay. Well, depending upon if it's reduced hours for when they're there, because then that does save some operational costs.
The current proposal is 3 days of service, which is a reduction from our current schedule, but it still is teen center offerings that would otherwise, the facility would be closed and not in use.
Right. So what we have to do is analyze what that cost savings is and what that means to us, because that's a different transaction than just simply closing it and saying you have no open hours.
Correct.
So we have to look at that as an individual. Okay.
And I thought it might also be helpful to describe why the girls softball league and adult softball leagues were identified.
Yes.
Not just the intensity of the field prep, but the fact that we're in the part of the calendar year and the fiscal year where soccer is coming to a conclusion, basketball registration has already started. The summer day camp activities have already taken place. So given that all those activities have already occurred and the temporary staffing or seasonal staffing that's a part of those scenarios has already been incurred as a cost, we can't eliminate something that's already occurred. So
Right.
where that leaves us is the girls softball league and adult softball league. And earlier today, we had a chance to also talk with the Parks and Rec Commission about some of these potential changes. They have ideas about how to resurrect some of these features. If the council chooses to proceed with the changes, and they're oriented towards cost recovery, sponsorships, just different configurations to the offering still being in play, but the costs being absorbed in different ways.
When would that time frame be for that to come on, for these leagues to start? When does that start?
Girls Softball League, do you have the dates? Let me see if I have.
Looking at Linda.
Girls softball would be it's starting in March.
March,
And they
okay.
go March, April, May normally.
Okay,
And the adult softball league starts in June.
okay, and it goes for how long?
It goes June, July, and maybe, depending on how many teams, the beginning of August.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. And before we jump into police, just want to note, again, a large body of changes in, other than public safety, and those numbers are still not enough to overcome the gap of 1.3 million where we started. So having said that, what is proposed as assumptions are, yes, sure.
Just rough figures for those total, proposed cuts.
For just for Parks and Rec?
No, everything since.
Everything
That's been
since
covered?
then.
Until now,
Okay,
it's about 175,000 for the.
all right.
That's it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
not a
what I
lot.
came up with.
That's the employee compensation portion, not including below there, all the other additional cuts.
Some
That's
of
just
the other
labor.
type
That's
of
just
stuff,
the
that's
labor.
just labor, okay.
Thank you.
175,000 labor,
Okay.
employee costs.
So when we move into the public safety realm, there are obviously very significant impacts to service levels. And so what's first proposed before we make our way toward taking a look at permanent positions is the possible elimination of the temporary graffiti abatement worker position. And we've been able to accomplish a great deal in terms of our abatement efforts and offer a awesome service to the public with professional color matching and speedy address of unsightly graffiti. But this position unfortunately finds its way into the discussion every budget year because of its temporary nature. And so we've included in the changes the elimination of this slot. We have also included a number of full-time permanent positions, and these include what I would describe today at this moment as 5 vacant sworn positions and 1 that we are expecting very soon to leave us. So in total, what is anticipated to be 7 vacant sworn positions, 6 of which are police officer 3s, and 1 of it which is a recently vacated commander slot. And what we're proposing for the 6-month period is to hold these vacant. Now, what impact will this have? I think from a graffiti abatement point of view, everyone is well acquainted with the unsightliness of graffiti left unchecked. It would leave our efforts oriented towards letter writing and trying to hold private property owners responsible and achieve their timely response. But honestly, the impact is extended periods of unsightly graffiti. We are also looking at significantly reduced staffing levels on every single shift. That's part of the schedule. We will encounter many challenges. We already do, even with the 7 slots in play. That depending on what calls are coming in to the department and issues in the city at any given time, we have challenges transporting people that are in custody to the jail and taking our sworn officers out of circulation within city limits to sometimes extended periods, trying to get a inmate or more than one received by the jail. On a practical note, what this means is that the availability, or the reduced availability of personnel will require our staff to deprioritize non-urgent matters and handle them in a very different way. So things that maybe have been commonplace in our city limits, where we respond with an officer to a traffic accident with no injuries. This may be an incident that is not assigned the scarce sworn officer because he has a higher level need to respond to something of higher priority. So in essence, we do expect increased response times, reduced staffing levels, and also an impact on the availability of personnel to work on task force assignments. Given the turnover that we're currently experiencing in our city's police department, we are working with very reduced available personnel to place on schedules. So as the council, I think, is aware, the nuance of this is that no matter how many positions we have programmed and budgeted, we're in a continuous recruitment cycle, which we expect to continue when we are challenged to keep pace with the pay of other agencies. Mm-hmm. So this will continue to be a difficult road for the city, at least through the fiscal year, if we're able to move forward with the belt tightening needed. We are also looking, so different from what the admin office has, many of the city departments have a janitorial cleaning service that the activities are bundled in a single contract. We have evaluated, the police department is a participating member of that janitorial contract, and so we are looking to reduce the service frequency that's a part of that contract, and have the intention to initiate those discussions with the vendor currently in place. While we got through cattle call in spite of our vacancies and turnover issues, we really do see an issue next year at this time providing the same level of service to support cattle call related activities. So examples would be the large scale traffic control effort that's undertaken. I'm sure as you drive to your location for parade route seating, you see that there's a combination of different work teams throughout the city that control the parade route, and those that play a pivotal role in ensuring the safe keeping of the parade route. It's Parks and Rec goes out there to initially set barricades, but then the police department actually ensures that the outer layers of traffic circulation are protected. And so our ability to have enough bodies to accomplish that will definitely be impaired next year if these staffing changes are implemented. Okay, any questions on this slide? Our total figure, when you look at graffiti abatement, graffiti abatement's currently housed inside of the police department. The savings associated with graffiti abatement no longer being available, the second half of the year amounts to about $14,000. Mm-hmm. From a budgeting point of view. Mm-hmm. And if you group for PD, police related expenses, and I'm gonna go back to that cover page in a moment that shows how the pie is divided. All of these changes, freezing for 6 months, permanent slots, and associated modifications yields us about $314,000. So again, as we look at that number for the Parks and Rec and library and all other non-public safety, and what was our total?
Oh, I need to make a correction. In my notes, I have some other non-public safety positions that I had just put figures to. And in that was animal control for 27,000. So that, you need to exclude that too. So it's about 149. Sorry about that.
Instead of the 175?
Yes.
So it's 100 and what?
149,000.
149,000. Okay.
In my list, I had.
Yeah, animal control is not currently proposed for elimination.
All right.
Okay, I'm sorry, do you have a question?
Oh, he answered it. Thank you.
Okay, on the fire side, as council is aware, we have a current interim staffing arrangement in place. It is recommended that interim staffing arrangements stay in place. And what that means is the retirement that we saw today of Captain Smith. It's vacating a position. We're in the process of testing and selection for a captain's list of eligible employees. It is recommended at this juncture that that particular promotion opportunity continue, but it be named an interim. And the reason would be that it would preserve for the city options in the future to adapt to changing budget constraints next year, and buys some time for the city to figure out is a different scenario to be evaluated. Okay, and so imagine for a moment that you have a list of captains who are eligible for promotion. That is an internal recruitment that has a firefighter, an existing firefighter, permanent moving up. And as a result of that person accepting an interim assignment as a captain, a firefighter position would be open. It is our recommendation to proceed with temporary staffing of the backfill, not to create another permanent role. So what is the impact generally on the service levels? Well, first, I think it, just as it does in PD, it makes us vulnerable to other agencies poaching our talent. Right. It also creates less experience in the teams and in staff, and those definitely have trade-offs. Okay. So
what's the savings on that one?
I'll give you here. Let me just do my fire.
It's on the,
it's on that sheet?
It shows on the sheet.
Because of the, it was the temporary salaries we had to adjust up from the original budget by, from about 160 to 250, yeah. And and the savings on with the captain, step 5 versus step 1, and then the reserve firefighter versus a full-time staff, basically total is about $30,000 range. I didn't bring the exact, I left that sheet out.
Approximately.
It's approximately about 30,000
right.
for the 6 months.
So,
savings?
Yes.
So the goal would be to not incur additional expense. So we had a long talk yesterday between fire, finance, and myself. Are we better off adjusting overtime and staffing figures for where we are this year? As you know, we've got skeletal staffing in play in order to keep 2 stations open.
Correct.
So as a consequence of that, we have, and because of the interim assignments of chief and others, we have more overtime being clocked than we would when we have everybody in place. And so the question that was posed was, we know at this time in the fiscal year, there's no way we can end within budget. Are we better off with an honest projection or not? And obviously, an honest projection is the goal, so as accurate as it can be to reflect what it'll take to get to the end of the year. Okay, so with that, I'm going to take you back to this slide that shows the overall big picture of how much of the 15 million general fund pie is assigned to certain activities. And if council would like us to research alternatives or consider different proportions, I think it would be helpful to hear some feedback from you. I know none of this is great news, and the intention is, really to do our best to keep the ship afloat as we make our way through the fiscal year and June 30 year end.
Thank you, Rosanna and Tyler. I think that was obviously quite a bit that went into that. And with that, maybe the best way to approach this, I think, for council is, I think if we went individually, there could be a lot of questions, and maybe we have some of the same ones. So maybe the way to do this is kind of approach this, whether it's the overall approach, number one, maybe some consensus there, unless, maybe taking one topic at a time, and then moving on to some of the proposed departments, maybe department by department. There might be some opinions and thoughts there. So just as a general overall, turning to council, is there anything on the general approach of what was proposed before we dive into maybe the specific departments? For example, use of relinquishment, I don't know, something, kind of the higher level.
And that's a one-time, really contribution and fix.
Yeah.
I mean, that helps this fiscal period
But not
that
the-
we're planning for, but really not the future, right? So we still need to look at, whether it's additional cuts or whatever that may be. We obviously, there's litigation included in some of the expense that we're going to be incurring, and so that's of concern as well. But I think the approach is a tough one, but I can see the result in the cuts. So I think we just need to discuss it further and see where we end up.
That's part of it. I guess I have a question. On we talked about the 450,000 interest on that one thing. So what you're telling us is that we're looking at the amount.
The gap.
For our deficit, or whatever you want to call it, the $1.3 million down to 396,000. So with these cuts, does that pull us to the 396,000? Is that what you're talking about? That's not inclusive of the 450 that we determined, or any types of fees that we may impose, or any increase in service levels, or any of that kind of items?
What's not included is, you're correct, no borrowings from any other types of funding anywhere else.
Okay.
And also, none of the fire cost recoveries, no figures of those.
None of that, because we don't have that in place yet.
Right.
When that goes into place, then we will figure that out
Yes.
in budget. So
Yep.
there are some things that we have in the works that are headed that way. Okay.
Can I want to make sure that I understood that part too. On the interest, the estimated interest from the relinquishment fund of the 450,000. So that is not included in this, part of this, reducing the deficit?
Not yet, no.
Okay,
No.
all right, thank you.
Not at this point.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I think, just a little bit of caution as we keep going, because some of these figures we're toggling between the 6-month
Yes.
projected cost
Yes.
versus an annualized, cost. So it's just, I want to make sure it's clear,
Everything on there is to the end of 6/30.
the 6-month, right?
It's only
Okay.
6 months
Yes.
at this point in
Okay.
time.
Yes.
Now, you may have to give us a little bit of a scenario of what a
Yeah,
year's savings
I
looks
understand
like
that.
for us
Yeah.
to be more
Yeah.
in tune. Since we're looking at 6 months, we can double it, and I guess that's what we'd probably look at.
For round figures, planning purposes, yes, if you just double.
We can just double, and
Yeah.
that's okay, but I'm not sure that holds true to the whole thing. I mean, I'm not sure that that's consistent, but
Close to it, probably.
maybe,
Yeah.
very close.
And I think it's also worth noting that as the new budget process for 2021 begins, we expect to be on schedule, because all of our employee arrangements are in place, so there's no reason why it should be delayed.
Okay.
And the city may consider different types of cuts in the next cycle. It doesn't mean if the changes occur today, that they are the carry-through arrangements for next fiscal year.
Right. And you don't anticipate us doing this action, at least maybe some of it right away, but most of it in January? Is that what you're talking about?
In general, yes.
In general.
Some of the cuts have already actually occurred.
Some of them, we
Yeah.
already have vacant positions. I mean, we already have certain things that are there in place. There are some things that we won't do probably until January. Okay.
Okay, and we can obviously always circle back to the overall strategies, approach, et cetera, but if that works for council, maybe just starting with just what was presented or proposed with the city clerk's department. I think one of the things obviously proposed there were the janitorial services. Are there anything, just looking at council, any questions there, comments, ideas?
The only comment that I usually make in that is that we've tried to do that before in a variety of different areas. We tried to do that at the county level. It doesn't work very well having your office staff also do maintenance, because the problem is it just doesn't work very well. And that either they're not, that's not their job description. The other thing is, and while some of that is, some of the minor things are okay, and you know, I've run an office, I understand that, and we've had to do some of that ourselves. But the reality is, in some cases with heavier maintenance, they just can't do it. I mean, they don't have the time, and they can't, and some of them can't do it. And so it doesn't usually work. And so I would just suggest that we look at that. Is there ways to cut that down without totally eliminating it? Is there a way to look at that in a different way and maybe not totally eliminate that service, or maybe look at providing it in a different way? And that would be part of my discussion on that. I don't necessarily mind the cut. It's a very small amount of money, but it does build up over time. But I just haven't seen it work very effectively in anybody's office over a long range time. Now, temporarily, yes, maybe for 3 or 4 months it might work, but I think long range for a year, I just don't think that works very well.
I just would like to add a comment. I know some of the members of the public here, they're employees, and don't think that we're taking any position lightly. I mean, I know we're discussing these positions, and there's faces to these jobs that we're talking about, so please excuse the open conversation we're having in that regard. It's not, you know, we're not disregarding anybody here, certainly. It's just, I know it's just a difficult conversation to have. Sometimes it feels, maybe to the staff here, that the consideration of the human being behind that position is not being, we fully consider all of that. So please, you know, I know sometimes it feels that that's not being considered, but I know for myself, and I know the rest of council feels that way, so.
Yes, we do know. Okay, but that's just a concern of mine. I don't know that we don't have to do it, and we will have a discussion on that, I think, among the council members. That's just a personal observation of mine, is that it never works very well, or long-term anyway.
Just to clarify on that one, is that a city staff or is that contracted out?
It's part-time temporary
Part-time temporary.
person.
Okay.
We don't,
So-
we chose not, the admin office did not participate in the janitorial service contract due to cost.
Okay.
It was less costly to do a direct hire than it was to participate in the bundle janitorial service.
And that person provides how much maintenance and to what departments?
Alma, would you like to walk through for a moment the schedule of our maintenance worker? It's 5 days a week.
5 days a week, he's here Monday from 9 to 12, and on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, he's here from 8 to 10. And on Wednesdays, he usually gets here about 8:30 because he goes to the finance department to throw the trash over there and to do a little bit of, I think it's really just throwing out the trash. So as soon as he's done at finance on Wednesdays, he comes over here. So he's only here for 2 hours or an hour and a
He's a
half.
part-time person, part-time in total, shared by primarily admin office and PD.
Okay.
With a 1 day of helping with the trash retrieval and gathering at finance department.
Okay, so, but he also serves between here and PD, right? So he works at both areas.
And in total, it's a part-time, not in total a full-time.
It's not it's not a full-time, it's just simply a part-time. Okay.
But all general fund.
All general fund, yes.
So the PD staff would also be looking at doing their own?
The PD staff
Maintenance?
primarily have a janitorial contract. The maintenance employee performs a variety of duties that aren't necessarily exactly that of the janitorial service.
Okay.
I might just suggest on this one, again, this isn't none of this is conclusive, but there's a few of these temporary positions that I look at where that's literally, it's like a one-person department to provide a particular service. And I understand there's some alternatives that we could potentially look at, but maybe I just look at bang for the buck and the overall, every penny counts, no doubt. I don't want to signal one cuts more or less than the other, but just from a dollar value, there might be a few here that council might consider, potentially that maybe looking at that, maybe not doing that, adding that back in and looking at it, still looking or digging deeper for some other alternatives that could clearly offset that cost.
I would agree. I think we're having a tendency to look at every dollar, which is very, very important.
Yeah.
But there are certain things, and I would agree with the mayor in that there are cuts that we can do without removing the position. They're still providing a very necessary service, as Sam has mentioned, Councilmember Couchman's mentioned, and maybe there is a better way to eliminate a larger portion of some expense. So I think we just need to consider everything at this point.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just kind of, so I want to make sure I'm signaling correctly where I'm going with that is understand that we're trying to achieve a goal here and we're not there yet. So we may push as council and look at some of these because again, I'm not maybe quite as concerned about offsetting this type of amount is we're looking at the overall larger picture, obviously. So just maybe keep that in mind as the approach for all the other departments as well as we're looking.
Correct.
Kind of what can you live with, what can you live without, and then ultimately what are we going to do? What direction are we going to provide? So we don't want to leave you directionless on that either. So maybe are we in agreement? Maybe kind of consider let's hold on that one. Maybe put a little asterisk next to that, and there might be others as we hit the other departments.
As we go through it.
I would agree with that.
If I may expand a little on the cleaning services, they service police, finance, the library, public works, and as Rosanna said, it is a contract. So I could not say we're just going to cut. I have to go back and we have to negotiate the whole contract with them. So
understood.
We understand that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes,
So
we
thank you.
understand that. But if you can make a few cuts,
Yeah.
that's fine. There may not be a lot of opportunity to do that, but that's what we want to look at, I think.
That particular position, that just the point about the office coverage challenge, I think is important to take note of.
Yes.
If he's the third person or the second person in the building, it's kind of hard to do without that. In addition to the maintenance services.
Understood. I think that's rather agreed. Is there anything else with council, maybe under city clerk's department before we move on to looking at the personnel suggestion?
The only comment that I would make, and I'm in agreement, is that I have run big buildings with janitorial service, and even though, a lot of times staff are willing to pitch in and help, that's really not their job, and it just deteriorates, and then you may run into other issues with the lack of cleanliness, and so I just feel that it's something that's really needed to have on staff. So that's my opinion.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Council noted. Maybe, and we can all circle back on the personnel, on the pin ceremony. Maybe that's, again, what was, I probably missed that. So I apologize if I didn't. What was the cost savings there for that?
I don't think we got it.
It was about $5,000.
Oh.
5,000?
And when I look at that, maybe there's an alternative we can look at that doesn't utilize general fund money for that purpose, and we'll talk about that. I think, as far as I'm concerned, I don't have a problem with doing that. I just think that maybe we can work out some other scenario, maybe some sponsorship, maybe we can do something that comes from another source. And we'll talk about it, I guess, in the future.
Maybe an asterisk. Okay, but thank you. That was helpful to get that amount. Unless council has any opinion on that, we'll kind of continue on. Development services, there's quite a bit there, but I'll just open up any council thoughts, questions on that.
The only thing I would say there is I think we had originally funded the code enforcement officer for a limited time frame. I don't know, I think 6 months or a year or something, and it's extended beyond that. My whole thing behind that, and certainly I don't like eliminating anybody's position, but I do think that under the circumstances with the budget the way it is, that maybe we do need to look at that, and maybe that would be something we would include in the budget. On the no backfilling of the building inspector position due to retirement, I think we should, for 6 months, let's look at that and see how that works out. And then if that doesn't work out for whatever reason, or we run into delays, or we run into problems, then we can revisit that. But I don't know that I'm in disagreement with either one of those items at this point in time, anyway.
I would be willing to probably move forward on that one and see what we can do in 6 months and see how, if it doesn't have a very negative effect, we can look at it again.
There hasn't been any kind of revenue from code enforcement, right? It's just been costs, yeah.
It's nice to have, don't get me wrong. It's very important to have, but under the circumstances with the budget the way it is, I think we've got to look at that.
Well, and I think quite a bit's been accomplished, and I think it's real important also as we continue on for all of these matters. This once again is absolutely something that can change, whether it's 6 months, 1 year from now. Maybe saving this for later, but suffice it to say, this is a very fluid and dynamic situation and environment. Not that this happened overnight. There's multiple factors here over the years, but moving forward, I think if addressing some of these issues now, the idea is that 6 months from now doesn't mean it's going to be a lot easier, but it should be better positioned as we keep moving forward. Within a year, potentially even less than that, or two, we could be having an opposite discussion of how we add back in.
Okay.
So, okay. Moving on, library, and the proposal there. Any questions or any particular comments from council? I don't see any.
No. I mean, does the page position, is that vacant now?
No.
Okay, there is a page there right now. Okay, so that would eliminate that position.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's a full-time position?
Number of hours per week.
It's 20 hours per week.
20 hours.
Part-time.
Okay.
What day of the week would you shut down?
Good point.
Yes.
Sure. The main library currently is open Tuesday through Saturdays. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we're open from 10 to 7, and on Fridays and Saturdays, we're open 9 to 5. The branch is open Monday and Thursday evenings from 4 to 8, and it is at the Del Rio school site, and because it is on a school site, we can only come in after school hours, so we're only there at 4 to 8. So what we're proposing is to look at closing Tuesdays at the main library, which leaves us open Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then have the branch open Monday, Tuesday night, which is where the trade-off is, and our Thursday night.
So that would give people access to some library services.
To some library services. Also, if somebody needs something that is not at the branch, but it's at the main library, we would bring it over the next day, the next time the library's open. The longest gap there is Thursday to Monday, but even if it's Monday to Tuesday kind of a thing, it would not be that long of a wait. And the main library, we open with an absolute minimum of 3 people for security because of the size of the building and the nature of the fact that it is a public building. At the branch, we can operate with 2 people because it is a smaller space, and the way that the room is laid out, there's visibility from one end to the other. At the main library, there isn't because of the way the wings are.
And they can come in and use the internet or whatever
Yes,
in either branch.
Right, and we have computer stations available, and we also have Wi-Fi over there. And then we have a smaller but very robust book collection, and almost all of our literacy services are conducted at the branch, the ones that are conducted by city staff or by library staff.
Okay.
And what would be the savings on this one?
Okay. Well, one of the things that help offset the general fund use from the library is the fact that we have a new grant this year for $25,000 for Families for Literacy Services.
Oh, yes.
And when we apply that to the already $12,000 that we've been putting into the part-time salaries for at least 8 or 9 years, that helps with cutting back on what we need for the general fund from the library.
So our annual savings amounts to about $45,000.
Okay.
Annual.
That's for the whole.
6 months.
6
Okay,
months,
that's
45,000 in 6
months?
months.
All these figures are for just the.
6
Okay.
months, okay.
Okay,
10 and 30s.
I think we have to kind of
So
proceed with that.
in this area, although it's not noted, the bundled janitorial contract that services many cities, if we're able to successfully reduce the frequency of service to
Mhm.
multiple buildings, the library is a part of that discussion as well.
Okay.
Historically, library staff have stepped up to perform certain janitorial duties.
Temporary
And if we did reduce frequency, we would be relying on staff to accept those other duties as assigned.
Okay, maybe that's not full-time. I do notice I frequent the library a lot. I go to the library board meetings. They have some issues with maintenance that other buildings maybe in the city of Brawley do not because of the nature of the clientele, but also the nature of the building and its openness and the ability for the public to come in on as long as they're open the whole time. And so a lot of times we only see people coming in to pay something or something else. And there they will stay there for hours and they will be there a long time. So that can sometimes be a problem. Will this have any impact on our ability to provide a cooling center or heating thing for some of the people?
It is a reduction.
It will be a reduction because the main library will be closed Mondays and Tuesdays.
Okay.
And I will say that if there are, in the past, if there are full-time staff and there's at least 2 people on a Monday and the temperature is at 110 or over, we will open the front door as a cooling center only. We will not provide library services.
No library, okay.
So we
Okay.
can continue that because that is an absolute important element of having the library.
Right.
So we've done that in the past with 2 full-time staff.
And there is some backup between, they're not going to be without a library on any given day. You're going to move.
Correct.
They
Sunday's
may
the
have
only
to
day we'll be
travel a little
closed.
ways to get there, but they'll still have that option for sure.
Actually, at the branch, a lot of people are there and they walk or they drive from their local neighborhood. And because there's a lot of high-density housing in that area, a lot of people can walk not only from that neighborhood, but from the beautiful apartments on Best.
Yes.
So we have a lot of people who walk to the branch library.
Okay.
Understood, very good. Any other questions on the library? We'll move on to, I think, next couple departments. There's quite a bit presented and proposed there, so
Yes.
we'll dive into Parks and Rec.
Okay. That one
And
disturbs
I
me.
know we have
but-
Parks and Rec delegates as well as a lot of history there, point of pride, so anyone want to begin? Any thoughts?
Well, that proposal has been discussed of the Boys and Girls Club taking over staffing duties at the teen center for 3 days a week, which would eliminate the staff needs there, which is a one temporary, and it's a part-time position.
Right.
You're still looking at utility costs, and so I guess the apples to apples comparison is, do you shut the whole thing down, offer nothing, and not have any costs for utilities, or to service the building in any way? Or do you maintain the utilities costs to have some kind of offering for teens? And I guess the question is, if there are some kids that would utilize the services that would, if those services weren't offered, would otherwise be vandalizing a building or something, there's some cost savings there, even though we're spending some money on utilities.
Or if I could interrupt, or if they are going to use it and they're not paying rent, pay for utilities. I mean, it's that simple too. So
Yeah.
it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like-
And
There's some
just along with that,
negotiation.
maybe, because there's several items here, maybe something to think about. I think there's a couple that really stand out. So again, senior center, teen center, working those alternatives. There's maybe a lot in the middle there. I mean, something as, like I said, we don't have a high amount of users. There's other alternatives for aquatics, those kinds of
Yes.
things. So, I mean, Those are things understandable, but just looking at that total amount of 149,000, it said total savings realized from
For
Parks and Rec, in that entire Parks and Rec bucket. At least that's what
That's the
I asked,
entire-
and that's what I wrote down.
I have 184, including senior citizen, so 20 off of that, that's 164,000
Okay.
savings.
I think
164 for the
Parks and Recs.
Okay, because I thought it was like 170, then you backed out minus animal
Oh, no,
control.
that was just, that was
An overall
from
picture,
Okay.
right?
Parks and Recs and all up just for the employee portion.
Okay.
Just the employee.
Employee wages and and benefits.
Without having to go through each line and saying, okay, how much is this, how much is this? What, my thought is just if maybe collectively as council, is there an asterisk or two we might consider there? And then we can kind of hone in on that. What are the impacts there? Because thus far, between the janitorial service and maybe the employee party, I mean, even if that's even in consideration, we're still talking about a pretty modest amount. I think here, Parks and Rec, and obviously the next slide, we want to look at that and see what other alternatives. So,
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, look, we're talking about admin position, secretary, and 2.5 maintenance worker positions eliminated. So
Yeah.
I would just throw this out there as well. I know that the city staff, our department heads, our city manager, our finance director, and department heads have looked at this carefully. And this is what we're considering as city council. I've been here a long time, and this is never fun. But one thing that I do think is very important too, I don't claim to be an expert in any department. I don't work in any department. And so I think it's important for staff, if you do have ideas with respect to other methods to cost cut, that you share them, whether it's with me or the rest of council. I think there has to be open dialogue too. And so I would just tell staff members, don't be afraid to call me, talk to me, because I won't consider it otherwise. So this is a time when we're making decisions that are important to everybody, and we need to have all the information possible. Right now, we're only considering what's being presented to us. So if there's other things that and other ways to save money, please let us know. And if you're not comfortable coming up here, obviously, in front of your department head, or call me, I don't care. We'll have a long conversation. I've done it with many employees within the city on various topics. It always stays confidential, and it will remain that way. But really, if you don't share those thoughts with me and other council members, we're not going to know about it. And I don't mean to undermine the work that Rosanna and finance and department heads have done, but I do want to give everybody an opportunity to at least express some thoughts that they have. So I think that's very important. So I wanted to share that because we're talking about multiple positions and the impact that that's going to have on service levels. I think that becomes very obvious to the public and to the city. So those are things I think we have to consider as well. It's not just money. It's about preservation of the community. So
I agree with you. And I think, though, that some of these things like reduced splash pad days, okay, we can look at that.
Yeah.
That's a pretty simple thing. It'll save us some money. I'm not sure it'll save us a lot of money, but it may be something we certainly want to look at. Those are kind of the things we can kind of look at that were pretty easy to do. I mean, we do have some feedback from the public that they may not like it, but it's still a fairly easy thing to do, to say, well, we're going to open it 2 weeks later than, or a month later than what we normally do, and we're going to close it a month earlier. I mean, those are little things that we can do. No winter heating of the Lion Center pool. I don't know who all that affects, but how many people and what are we talking about? No lap swim, we talked about that, the fewer number of people.
or not backfilling positions. I mean,
Yeah,
those are-
delayed plaster replacement, okay, if we have to, that's the way it goes. On the,
The delayed plaster replacement, just as a FYI, that is, we're on notice with the Public Health Department about the need
right.
to replaster.
Right.
So delaying the improvement potentially delays continuous use.
Okay, and that might be the case, or else I just send the public down to the county to discuss it with them. But be that as it may, there's a lot of things that happen. I mean, mowing time's elongated, that doesn't really have too much impact on, it does have impact on the parks, but I think people would understand that, since we're trying
Not
to.
always.
Not,
I mean,
yeah,
they
you're probably
won't.
right.
I mean,
No, they don't
I know that.
understand it, but they'll get used to
But
it.
at least we have an explanation.
Yes, yes, at least we have an explanation for that. Some of the other things I think we have to talk about, and we'll be talking about that. I think, with the softball league or adult softball league, if they're willing to cover more of the cost, are we willing to meet them halfway? What are we willing to do in that area?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we have to talk about.
What about this, to make it easier to kind of contemplate? What if we take an iteration of the Parks and Rec some of these impacts on service levels and look, is there a way to kind of split the difference? Is there a part-time solution for the senior center, a part-time solution for the teen center? I think there's some alternatives. Maybe there's not. I don't know.
They're already part-time. All
they're-
those slots are.
I'm talking about hours, and I'm talking about costs. I'm talking about if it's already part-time, then what's part of part-time, 1/4 time? I don't know. That's all I'm getting at is maybe not. Maybe that stays part-time. Maybe other of these, some of these other items we go with, just like Sam was saying, there's some pretty simple things here. Some of the tougher things, I think just revisiting the idea is just principally speaking, instead of looking at 160 of cutting into Parks and Rec that affects so many citizens as well as jobs, looking at, what if we saved 100 instead of 160, for example? What would that look like as a proposal? So maybe not less, and then obviously that's going to force us to look elsewhere. I'm not, as I went back to that, but I don't know. Rather than, like I said, item by item, I think here there's definitely been some suggestions made. I think this, there's an impact to that. Maybe there's a little bit more work we can do there and still provide some of these services, and then look once again, like I said, look elsewhere. Or we're facing, like I said, that ultimate gap. We might be looking at potentially a larger amount to consider from relinquishment. And again, we're looking at this to get us 6 months down the road. Then beyond that, right? The next time we go through this exercise, I would imagine in the next few months, we're going to be looking at this over an annual budget, I would assume. So.
Are there some items that maybe were, like Sam was detailing some of these, that maybe we can all agree on, that we'd be willing to move forward on, or how do we?
I think, kind of like I said, we toss that out. I think there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Just looking at, we've seen the dollar amount. I don't know, unless there's a very specific suggestion, by all means.
Well, I guess I don't have one. I just had one question about the pool, which is that if we don't heat it, what are the users that actually are now contributing to that cost center that will no longer be able to use that because of the heating?
The winter use is pretty limited by the institutional
Good.
users, with the exception of IVDA, and the current proposal suggests from staff, and I do want to note that many of these specifics were actually generated after the department internally discussed, okay, if we have to lose something, what are the offerings that have the most minimal impact to service levels. But I do think there are methods for accommodating things, let's say like a special competitive swim meet over a number of days. We would ratchet up the temperature to the 78-degree standard or somewhere in that vicinity, as opposed to keeping it at that amount for
What you need to do, though, is give us, I think you're ultimately going to need to give us, what does that mean in terms of cost? Because you're going to probably incur some additional cost by rapidly ramping it up in a 3-day time frame. What is that cost going to be versus keeping it heated for the entire
month? Right, all we can
month,
do is project what we know to be our gas
right.
expense currently, and make some kind of estimate of a percentage decrease.
Because that's the bigger thing. How much are we saving from doing that? If we can do that, that might be an easy fix for us to save some money, but not out the whole amount that you're talking about.
In general, the months that are scheduled for use by the 2 school districts are kind of at the beginning of the school year when it's very warm, and towards the end of the school year when it's warming up again.
So if this doesn't affect a lot of people, I think we move forward with it. But I mean, these are the kind of things we can talk about.
It's a facility, I think I just said 5 to 10, but if you include IVDA, I mean 20. It's probably on a given day, there's 20, so even in the winter, if you're including IVDA, not just the lap swimmers.
It's not.
And,
understanding.
but it's an expensive facility to keep going.
Exactly,
I
understanding how
totally
expensive per day it is, even if nobody's using it.
And
it's-
our cost recovery strategy on the institutional users is 10%, excluding personnel and capital expenses. So they already, there's a discount, 50% of 50 or 60% of the actual value, and 10% of that.
So, Rosina, that's what I'm saying, without us putting specific rules to just the reevaluation of what maybe a little less here to sort of accommodate some of these pretty key, Parks and Rec. My point being philosophically here, not maybe backing down a little bit on Parks and Rec, and then we'll continue to explore some of the other areas.
Is there any consideration, this may be a little bit different, but is there any consideration, for example, like the Lion Center pool, that it would be, aside from just like the winter months where it's cold, right? But maybe sometime beyond that, that it wouldn't be accessible? And it would open up, obviously, during, I know we have contracts with the school, but that's when things warm up anyway. So is there any consideration of doing that? And would that result in any real cost savings?
I don't expect so, because the cost of keeping it in operation with chemicals, the number of users that you have drives how much chemicals we put
Right.
into it. So, the more use, you generate more revenue, but you increase other supply-related expenses. So that we didn't
pretty popular in the
consider
summer.
draining the
Yeah.
pool or taking it out of use as an alternative.
Maybe not draining it, but just not operational, right? So.
Short of draining it, I think the
Short of
cost to
drainage,
keep it in or at least keep the chemistry where it needs to be is
Still a cost.
Probably going to be
significant.
close to what it would be.
Yeah, whether it's being
used.
used or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless it's middle of summer.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
that's different. But if you're talking about draining it for the winter,
No, I wouldn't say draining it. I would just say, obviously where there isn't the heavy use.
Like mothballing it, kind of.
I think
can
there-
you mothball something?
No, I think you're right.
No, I think there are
a-
issues with
I think if you could,
draining
everyone would.
Yeah, I don't
here
think you
because
can
of water
drain it.
tables and because of the plaster
It
falls
starts
off.
to lift. I
It's
mean,
dangerous.
It'll lift
yeah.
right out of the ground.
Reduction of use, though,
Yeah.
during the year. I mean,
I'm not talking about draining. I don't know who brought that up, but yeah, I'm talking about reduction in use.
You really can't drain them,
anybody
and
that's
then
on
it
the
affects the
rules, we
plaster. The
can't drain it.
plaster will flake off if it's not wet.
All right, good. Moving on, police department, quite a bit there again. Is there any thoughts, considerations there?
My thought is, I know that as I've mentioned before, we have vacant positions that we're not backfilling. That may be a way to control cost.
Yes.
And I would be open to doing that. With respect to the graffiti abatement officer or position, I shouldn't say officer, but worker, I think that's been a big benefit to the city, and I would not want to see that eliminated. So I'd still be open to keeping that. It goes along with the other smaller positions that we have within the city that I think are still very important. So, but that's just my perspective. I'm not sure what the rest of council thinks, though. Those are my opinions.
I think I would be, because the positions are vacant, if we don't backfill, I think we can try to see how that works for us for a 6-month period.
I agree.
And if we find out that, we really can't handle the needs of the community, then we can rethink it. But we're not taking any formal action to let go of anybody. We're just not backfilling current positions. So I'd be willing to look at that.
Excuse me.
And I think we're going to evaluate that after the 6-month
Right.
period is up, and we're going to probably evaluate it ongoing, and then we'll see where we go with that. Graffiti abatement, I kind of agree with George. I think, we've done some great things with that, and we're probably one of the best-looking cities in the valley. I, don't want to offend anybody, but I think we're one of the best-looking cities, and we handle the graffiti problem pretty well. And if that's $14,000, I hesitate to try to depend upon private sector because it doesn't usually work that way.
Yeah,
So I
even though
think
it should,
we've got to
right?
take a look at it, and we will. If there's any way to save money in another area, I'd rather do that.
I think maybe that's one of another one that maybe the asterisks. I know some of the others we were not very specific in terms of direction, but maybe an asterisk next to that one. And again, that being, as well as my opinion, that's a quality of life issue that we fought. But the other thing I think we've all recognized, there's a very specific individual talent also that kind of comes with that. In other words, even if it's something that you want to revisit a year from now, you're not necessarily going to get the same service level, dedication, as well as talent. So I think that's also a consideration.
And we could also revisit it at that time if something happens.
Absolutely.
I did have one question about that last line that says withdrawal from task force assignments and elimination of revenue generation potential. Do we know what task forces we'll have to withdraw from and about how much revenue we would be losing from that?
Good evening, Honorable Council. Robert Sawyer, Police Chief. Currently, we are not participating in any of the 3 potential task force that we've traditionally participated in, effective as of about 2 weeks ago. Our employee that was assigned to the Homeland Security Investigations Border Enforcement Security Task Force has resigned. He was actually hired by HSI, so that hurt a little bit in losing the body, but they did recognize talent when they saw it, and then they hired him from the city of Brawley. And then the Narcotics Task Force is the other task force that we were currently participating in. Due to staffing level shortages, we've had to remove that person from the task force,
So they're not
pull
in
them
there
back
right
to
now.
patrol. Our hope was that that would be temporary in nature, but given what's before us tonight, it looks like that'll be a temporary, permanent fix for the time being.
Yeah, for the
So the costs that are associated with that, or the loss of revenue, pertains to the reimbursement from the high-intensity drug trafficking area funding that we receive. Currently, that varies by position. In January, that's set to be about $80,000 per position, so $160,000 total between the 2 positions that would not be received, because that would be going to pay salaries and benefits if they were assigned to the task force. So that money will go away. One thing I will caution is if we vacate those positions for any length of time, I would say 12 months or greater, we will probably lose our funding in those positions, and it'll be absorbed by either San Diego County or another local agency here. That happens pretty frequently. Those are coveted spots.
Okay.
The other side of it that we have to consider is the loss of asset forfeiture. All of the formulas throughout all of the task forces are pretty much dependent upon participation in the task force. And then the amount that we would receive from any type of seizure or sale of contraband, seized profits or seized assets, would be based on our involvement, our active involvement in the investigation itself, and secondly, the task force. So our ability to receive any asset forfeiture monies for the time being will be stymied by the fact that we don't have a body there.
And how much generally in a year, just say take this year or last year, how much asset forfeiture money did you receive?
So we're cautioned and directed by the federal government not to forecast asset forfeiture.
Okay.
I will draw your attention back to the recent radio upgrades that we participated in.
Right.
It was about $550,000 that was paid for the police department's fund completely out of asset forfeiture. I would say that on an annual basis, generally between $100,000 to $1 million to $3 million, just depending on, again, the active
Depending upon
participation.
what happens, and you can't really predict that.
And keep in mind that
We
can't forecast that.
I'm just wondering what we get,
Exactly, and then keep in mind that on the federal level, which is where we receive the bulk of our asset forfeiture, seizures usually run 2 to 3 years. There's a delay of time between the time that the asset's seized, and then there's the court proceedings or the civil proceedings, regardless, are depending upon which way that the person's going to be prosecuted or not prosecuted. So there's a delay in time that we receive those. We still have money in the pipeline. I don't know off the top of my head what that is, and again, I would just caution, we can't really forecast or be dependent upon that money. I want to bring it to council's attention that our ability to participate in those sharing opportunities moving forward without a body assigned is extremely limited.
Yeah, you're not going to get it.
Additionally, you'll note that I've came before council several times asking to purchase equipment. I believe it was approximately $120,000 over the last fiscal year from a HSI, Homeland Security investigation, pot of money referred to as state and local overtime that allows the purchase of equipment. Because we will no longer be participating in that task force, our ability to use that funding to purchase equipment to offset general fund cost will be eliminated. So that was about $120,000 in equipment. That was a very good year for us. I would not say that that's an average year. Very good for the city of Brawley and being able to take advantage of that. But our ability to do so going forward will be limited, and therefore there will be some burden on the general fund to keep safety equipment in place that would normally, there would be normally a potential for us to look at federal partnerships funding a portion of that.
Okay.
Chief, could we keep you there?
I'll stay here as long as you need, sir.
Well, big department, and obviously all these cuts are, considered pretty big and impactful. So of the 6 positions, I think it's been commonly held, we understood on staffing, there's always been a challenge and sometimes worse than others in keeping full staffing because of attrition, for all the various reasons discussed in the past. But what of the 6, what in your mind, as far as staffing, would maintain membership or participation in one or both, of these task force, short of full staffing? I know that's the desire, but we've never
I understand
had
the question.
We've rarely had that. So I mean, really realistically, when we have had a presence of between our activity with HSA and TF, what is bare minimum?
So
of the task?
I understand the question.
Yeah.
I will say the caveat that I would want to warn everybody about is, regardless of what staffing level is, whether they were maintained at the full staffing level or reduced to this, we're looking at probably any given time a 20% of our employees being out for one leave or another.
That's right.
So this will basically bring us down to bare bones on patrol. And patrol is the backbone of any law enforcement agency. It's my responsibility to ensure that citizens of Brawley are safe. Patrol is the mechanism to do that. Everything else is kind of a plus or a feather in our cap. So our ability to really assign anyone to a task force on a permanent basis without having to pull them back and forth to cover patrol would be extremely limited. If we were looking at,
with this proposal, right? But
correct. Now there's
the
a potential, even with this proposal, for us to replace one of the task force officers. What that would mean is a reduction of the administrative agent position, which was formerly a sergeant's position, and pulling the administrative agent, assigning him back to a patrol team to fill patrol coverage, and being able to send potentially one person to a task force. Again, that would be something we'd have to consider in light of some of the changes to fleet services. That may be more of a burden on the department than we'd be able to undergo. I don't know at this point in time, because we don't have a full understanding of what future fleet services are going to look like. There will continue to be a need of a person to act as the hub within our agency, even though the city's looking at a hub as well, to be able to move vehicles back and forth and everything. So generally, I would say 2 positions would be ideal. Those are the funded positions that are available. When I say funded, understand that it's not 100% of the funding, depending on the individual salary and everything.
What would that disparity, and that's what I was getting at, there's a benefit actually to these memberships, as you've already articulated. That was the first part of the question. So the question for us on the cost benefit analysis, which I'm sure you thoroughly have done, what is the offset total to those 2 positions?
So currently, the formula is a little different. The $80,000 would apply in January 1st. HIDA has received an influx of money from the federal government, and their budget has actually been increased for the first time in about 15 years. So I'm fairly confident that increase will occur January 1st. Currently, we're looking, I think one of them is around $47,000 as far as reimbursement. The other runs around $63,000. I could be off on those figures. I can provide firm figures for council at a later date once I've had an opportunity to review my notes. As to what it would cost a fully burdened officer and what the offset would be, I'd have to enlist the assistance of our finance director for part of that. But keep in mind, we're not sending PO3s or entry-level officers to these positions. Otherwise, I would say it would be close to fully funded, even a fully burdened position. But we're sending usually an agent level or even a top step agent to these positions because they're
experienced.
They're experienced agents. We want to send our best and brightest to the task force to ensure that the participation is worthwhile, so we receive more of the sharing dollars available. So I don't have the figures off the top of my head. I'd be glad to get back to you and work with Tyler and the city manager on that and report back to you on that in a day or 2 time. But roughly probably 25 to 30,000, best guess, being upside down, given the $80,000 that would be taking place in January. Again, neither one of them are fully funded at that level.
And as you mentioned, we can't nail down an amount from one year to the next on asset forfeiture, but again, that's another consideration as well in terms of potential value on the asset or the
correct. Unfortunately,
the offset side.
None of the asset forfeiture monies are allowed to be utilized for salaries or things of that nature. So
understood.
That is a drawback to it, but there's certainly a benefit to participating in these
To the general fund,
task force There's the ability to, improve existing equipment, to purchase non-existing equipment, and in some cases, purchase vehicles and things of that nature.
And Chief, one last thing, I think it's important to understand that the core service of keeping the city safe and the patrol, just remind, because it isn't common knowledge, the deployment model of what it takes minimally on a day in and day out, because this is a 24/7 business. So,
it is.
yeah.
So I can remember a time when I first started in law enforcement where Brawley had 2 officers in the middle of the night working patrol, and that's just not a safe level that I would be comfortable deploying. What you're looking at here is probably a hybrid of a solution, meaning that we currently work 12-hour shifts. We have 4 shifts, a day and a night shift at the beginning of the week and 1 at the end of the week to cover all 7 days. This particular model here would reduce patrol staffing from a level of 4 or 5 officers per shift down to 3 officers per shift plus a supervisor. So you'll, on a fully staffed day, you'll have 4 uniformed patrol officers and a sergeant, I should say, so a combination thereof. What this will allow us to do to offset some of that is to have a swing or a mid-shift to be able to cover the larger or the busier hours of deployment, and have 1 officer at the beginning of the week, 1 officer at the end of the week. Now, the numbers would work out a little bit differently, but I have to take into account that just because we have those numbers on paper, and even if we have a name assigned to those numbers, it doesn't mean that they're contributing every day of the work week due to injuries and a number of different things that occur, vacations and so forth. So in reality, even though if a shift is staffed at 3 patrol officers, if we have somebody in court, as we have this past week, if we have somebody out on vacation as we do today, what you'll see is we'll have 2 officers and a sergeant. And that's exactly what we ran with today. We had 2 officers and a sergeant working patrol, and fortunately the detective division was a little bit light. The sergeant was able to go out and assist patrol because it's call to call, and we have individuals waiting in the lobby. I've personally fielded a complaint because we had an individual waiting about 45 minutes in the lobby. It's not for lack of effort, it's just for lack of personnel. So that would be probably a more consistent idea of what would occur. We're going to have calls pitting in the queue, less proactive law enforcement taking place, and a deployment of, on average, probably 2 officers and a supervisor, even though the third position's funded and it's there on paper. We do have the need for vacation days, there are sick days, there are a number of different things. We also have mandatory training that has to occur every 24 months. So we have to make sure that we meet post regulations and requirements. So there's a number of things that contribute to, just because we have the 3 officers on the shift doesn't mean that they're going to be present and contributing to answering patrol calls or calls for assistance. They're there, but they have other obligations and needs. Hopefully that answers some of the questions, sir.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions?
Thank you, Chief.
Guys? Suggestions? Thank you, Chief. All right, are we moving on to fire, or are there any other comments, ideas?
Not so much about police. I want to go back, and maybe we do it now, or maybe we do it in further discussions. I want to go back to senior center, how many people are impacted by that, what our cost actually is for that service, and then how many people are impacted by that, and does it impact the senior nutritional program? I need to know all of that. So,
How many citizens are impacted?
How many citizens, right. Senior citizens, yes.
Would you want to wait till after fire, or you want to wait?
We can wait. I mean, I just wanted to go back. Now,
That's fine.
sorry.
Right now, it's
It's
fine.
up to you guys. It's up to
We're
you.
gonna do it.
So the change in employee compensation in order to keep it staffed takes about $14,000.
Okay.
And what we anticipate as other line item changes as a result of regular hours no longer being there, it amounts to about, let's see, another $6,000.
Okay. Okay. So
And
20,000 total.
in terms of whether the nutrition program would be affected, the city would continue to be in a lease agreement with Catholic Charities.
That's right, we are in an agreement.
They actually pay rent to the city for use of the
Mhm.
space and would continue to be a tenant.
And they provide the staff for that, so they would be in there operating that during that time frame?
We continue to open and close the building and perform that type of duty. But the regular kind of hours of being open would be reduced.
Do we
as
have a
result.
figure on numbers of people that come in every day?
In Catholic Charities, their lease agreement increased, about 2 years ago? What was
Yeah.
it? About 2 years ago?
Which we.
And are they there every day, Catholic Charities?
I'm going to get, actually, if I can have Linda come forward for just a moment, please. I'm going to walk you through. I'll
Yeah,
give you what my notes are.
we do get money from that.
Mhm.
I think it had been like 1,500 for a long
Yeah,
time.
something. We took it a little negative because of that, but that's neither here nor there.
Hello again. Linda Self, Recreation Coordinator. Each day, the Senior Center provides lunches. That's through the Catholic Charity side. And they are there from 9 to 1 p.m. On the other side, which is where our senior coordinator is, we have classes that run, such as knitting, crocheting, jewelry making, and some of them just go in there just to hang out.
Okay.
And so on a daily basis, on that side of the building, I would say there would be approximately maybe 15 to 20 people that are serviced. Whereas on the other side, we have more because they do provide the lunches.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So 15 to 20 people a day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The
And more on
Senior
the
Center
food.
IBC
Yeah.
currently offers
That's a lot.
community
Yeah,
classes.
IVC does offer community classes. That's 2 days a week, from 10 to 11. It's like an exercise class. They're done for this semester, but I believe they want to continue for next semester.
And does that require that we heat and cool the building for them in order to provide those classes? And would they continue to provide those classes even if we did not have a senior coordinator?
They would, but it would take somebody to go and open and close for them.
And we'd still have to have the building open?
Yes.
So we don't save in the utility costs in that situation?
Correct.
This proposed scenario accommodates those classes being provided by IBC.
Okay. And then when we heat and cool that building, is it all inclusive? Or can we shut off utilities to one section and keep them going for another section?
Did just the seniors get hot, or what?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's all I'm asking.
Yeah, there's two different, you can cool off the side where they dine and then put off the
Okay, just
the other
asking,
side.
just asking, because we're looking at all costs. so-
Yeah.
The Senior Center Coordinator, how many days does that person work? Is it full-time? Is it part-time?
It's a part-time.
How many hours?
She works from 8:30 to 2:30. And then she does do rentals on the weekends if she needs to.
8:30 to 2:30,
Mhm.
every day?
Every day.
Okay.
Every day.
And the classes includes those Zumba classes too? Is that part of the IVC thing, or is that?
No,
something
that's
else?
different. That takes place in the Catholic Charity side. And that's during their time, between the 9 and 1. And I'm sorry, it's not 2:30, it's 3:30, where she
3:30.
works.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And they take care of that? Catholic Charities takes care of that?
Yes, because they're on their,
That's on their side.
they are on their side.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Maybe at this point, thank you. I was thinking maybe at this point, comparing notes, whether they're mine or Rosanna yours, maybe like a recap of where we're at, and then if we're leaving anything out, we can discuss that. But it sounds like, obviously, more to go to really get this corralled and nailed down, and I would obviously make, individual suggestion that we're able to go in and have these discussions individually as well as might come up with more,
Right.
some more thoughts and ideas
I
around
think
some
so.
of what we discussed. But Rosanna, what's kind of the recap of?
So, just big picture, we attempted to achieve a significant savings overall, but we're still 400,000 short. And considering the items that are proposed and are part of the current reductions, council has directed for us to take another look at the manner in which janitorial services are provided for the admin office. You have said from a personnel point of view, you would be open to alternative arrangements to the employee appreciation luncheon format. You indicated for development services, and this would include planning, building, and community development, that you would be open to us revisiting the topic after a period of time to understand what impact not backfilling that position might have, presumably on development activity and responsiveness to business growth and construction activity. On the library front, you indicated openness to the proposed arrangements, and the emphasis, if I understood correctly, was maintaining some form of access across the two locations for as many days across the week as possible, and you'd like to see us as staff be mindful of the Cool Center component. For Parks and Recreation, these have, that been probably some of the most significant service level cuts in addition to PD. And what I believe I've heard from council as direction is to consider some alternative scenarios where perhaps a $100,000 cut instead of a $165,000 cut be proposed, and if at the conclusion of these summary comments, if you have any direction on where you would be open to seeing those, we certainly are open to receiving that feedback. On PD, I heard you direct that you would like to retain graffiti abatement as a courtesy service, and that you are concerned about the service level reductions from a patrol point of view, but recognize that sometimes we're operating with vacancies that are the equivalent. And it's noted that if a frozen action occurs for these positions, that we are potentially foregoing our ability to capture HIDA, slot, and asset forfeiture revenue generation. That you'd like us to look at how we can maximize those opportunities in the future. Shy of that, if council has any further guidance with reference to that gap of $396,000 and potentially an additional, let's say, 75 to 100, I think it would be helpful for us to understand our marching orders and parameters for a final budget to be presented to you. Do you have anything you want to add to?
Could I suggest something?
Absolutely.
Maybe, I know we've considered these things, but would there be any interest in maybe getting a couple council members to meet with city staff and further develop that? Maybe the thoughts on that? That way we can.
I was already thinking of it, and this was important because I know some of us, or maybe all of us, I don't know. Obviously, we don't discuss these things, but individually, I know we have engaged. I know I had a conversation, albeit not quite this long, but I think staff's been pretty diligent about also trying to get as many specifics. So again, a lot of work here has been done here, and maybe to Councilmember Nava's point, I mean, if council's open to that, maybe even just a budget committee or something to a point, and I'd be happy to be part of that, or if council feels different, I'm indifferent. If there's someone who wants to step up and volunteer themselves, that's fine too.
I don't mind going to a meeting. I think you probably should be there, or two of us anyway, and whoever would like to do that. I'm open to anyone that wants to.
You're open. And you're
I'm
open.
open. Everybody's open.
We are.
It falls
Probably
on
don't
us.
want more than two of us.
You can't.
It has to be
Yeah.
posted
Right,
as a
we
meeting,
can't have
otherwise.
more than two.
I mean, and if anybody else would like to do that, that's fine with me too.
I don't know, do you want me to be part of it? Do you want George to be part of it? Or?
Sam, I think, had expressed interest, right, Sam?
I certainly
You're gonna be
can.
there? I think the two of you.
Just as a matter of,
I mean, I
that's
would
something we
look
could
for
just
input
appoint
from
here.
you
It doesn't
guys
have to be on
before
the
I
agenda. So, okay. And then,
have ideas.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
Is our goal to stay on delivery of the final budget for the next council meeting?
That is
Or-
the goal,
Hopefully.
and that's
Okay.
why we would want this
Hopefully, that's what we
committee
will do.
to be represented, but that's not a foregone conclusion. It depends, obviously, on what comes forward. I think with that would be ultimately the goal, obviously. I suppose the worst-case scenario is the meeting after that, but I think that's the goal is the next meeting to do that, to stay on track for that. I think we're getting down to a few of the in-the-weeds items that we don't have enough background information on yet, as the nature of some of the questions. So even the number that was used, for example, with Parks and Rec, that's completely unqualified. It may not be that. We may stay with, the suggested cutbacks, or it may be something that looks quite different. But obviously, as I said, we have to look at everything and see how we're going to achieve the balance. Yes.
We've mentioned the interest accrued on the relinquishment funds. Is it a foregone conclusion that that is what we're going to use to close this now 500,000 plus gap?
We haven't commented on that, so I would say certainly if there's thoughts on that, certainly consider that. I myself, I'll lead bat on that. I think at this juncture, understand that's one-time money, but the fact that it is interest, accrued, I would almost place that in the bucket of reserve fund, because again, it's interest earned off of a principal amount. If we can avoid in the future, the next question is, are we going to dip into the principal amount in order to continue to close this gap? Unless
Or
we figure
we
out
can
the other 400,000.
Or greater interest on that money, which I think.
That was
we're
the
not,
question
but,
I had too. Are we
that's just
doing
another-
everything we can
Absolutely.
for interest on that?
Two scenarios.
I would not want to see us go over the interest that we have on that to close up this gap, because it signals that we're willing to do that we're willing to dip into the principle that the community believes is for road improvements for Main Street and Old Highway 111, and I think that would be that's the wrong thing to signal, and it's also, I think we would get a lot of negative feedback from that if we had to go to that measure.
At least for me, that's never been a consideration. So, I mean, it's just not something that I would consider.
Yeah.
I'd look at other measures to bridge that gap before that would even be considered. And I, quite honestly, I wouldn't even consider it.
Yeah.
The interest is one thing, but as far as getting into the principal amount.
The hope is that between the conversations that we can get to the point where we're at 450,000, and that's it.
I think it's, and this is probably the bean counter in me. The 400,000 is what the interest was earned since 2011. In that account is less than $9 million total.
Yep.
So it's not like we still have 9 million left after we take 400 or whatever the gap it was ever decided. So that's important to know. Is we're right about them, 8 million with the plan to spend a lot more of that this year. So that's just want to make sure that's understood.
Do we have the 8 million based upon what we spent so far on 111, or is that different?
So, if
I'm breaking this
memory serves me correctly, we're at about $1.1 million on Old Highway 1 and 11 North 8th Street related improvements.
And that's already been taken out?
Well, we're still, so the contract with API is still open as a result of the change order that is addressing the portion of the county right away. So we're not closed out on the project yet, and until it's fully closed and a notice of completion is issued, I can't tell you what the final value
Right,
is. We haven't awarded contract.
we wouldn't know. Okay.
And then with reference to the traffic signal at Cesar Chavez and Main, we are still in progress, which is why it continues on our.
So that would still have to
council
come out of that amount of money?
Correct.
Okay, I got you.
But it's somewhere south of 8 million principal will be left after.
Right, that's true.
Is there an opportunity for something that's higher interest bearing to invest that 7.9 in?
No, we're limited by California code and what we can invest in. And as a matter of fact, on the next agenda, when the investment policy, I can bring something to you that shows what we can and can't invest in, if that's what you guys would like to see.
Sure. And we did increase some investment levels there, and we did receive a little extra money on stuff that we do have invested, but it's very minimal. It's not a large interest rate, because we have to be very safe about what we have. It has to be fully insured. We have to do all of those types of things. And lending institutions won't take all the money either. There are different limitations that they have on that too. So, okay.
Okay, then, back to just, so we can move on. Are we
Back
are
to
we in
fire,
agreement
do we want to
with,
go back to,
with a committee and,
I mean, I'm willing to meet. We need to meet.
okay.
Just as-
Then, we'll move forward with myself and, Councilmember Couchman, and, after our meeting concludes this evening, we'll make whatever, we'll look at calendars and schedule right away.
All right. Sounds good.
Is there anything else,
Are we going to-
council, on this? There's quite a bit.
We're not going to fire, we're not gonna,
Actually,
You are
I did, then something else came up, but my assumption was we're accepting what's there, but certainly. we can
Okay, yeah,
discuss
I mean,
fire. If any thoughts, yeah.
we can accept what's there. I mean, I'm willing to do that at this point in time. We'll
The
have to
other
talk.
staffing scenarios that were presented, because there were alternatives that came
Mhm.
forward for the department, they either produce some safety concerns about the staffing levels or require the closure of station number 2.
Okay, so this is
the
one
proposal to
scenario.
Keep it as bare bones
Correct.
as we can, but keep both stations
Yeah,
in
correct.
open status.
Okay, all right.
All right. Thank you, Roseanne, thank you, and more to come. Appreciate the work on that. Council will go back to the agenda. We'll move to item 6, which is a departmental report. Looks like we'll have our update report from Guillermo Silas.
This one's yours, sorry about that. Here.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Guillermo Sillas, Public Works Director. The update on the project of the water treatment plant sedimentation basin components. Today, we had a conference call with the contractor and provided a revised schedule. We participated with the contractor, the designer, the construction manager from Lee and Rowe, Mr. Ruben Mireles, who was the former operations division manager, and engineering staff. The contractor informed us that the chain and flight components are ready to be shipped from the manufacturer, and that the fiberglass launder troughs will start to be manufactured next week. The first week of December, the contractor will start with the demolition of the basin number 1. And the second week of December, they will start with the installation of the chain and flight components. And they expected to complete the rehabilitation of the sedimentation basin number 1 by January 31st next year. Then they will perform a 30 days run test, and then to be able to proceed with the rehabilitation of the sedimentation basin number 2. The date of completion remains the same as in the contract. We agreed to have a weekly conference call to keep track of the progress. As you might recall, mentioned that they were behind, but we implemented this strategy to try to keep it on track. Any questions? Okay, the next project, it is the rehabilitation of pumps 422 and 423. The emergency continues. The contractor continues working on the rehabilitation of the pump 422 and keeps the date to bring back to the plant the pump 422 approximately by the end of November or early December. Not much to change there on the updates. The next one is the temporary traffic signal cabinet installed on Main Street and Cesar Chavez. The temporary signal cabinet has been working properly since October 7th. this year, and the permanent cabinet continues to be expected to arrive by the end of November. Any questions? Okay,
Sounds good.
thank you.
Thank you very much. No
good.
questions. We'll move on to our next item, item 7, City Council Member Reports, and we'll begin with Councilmember Hamby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's been quite a few weeks since we've given reports, but I'll keep mine brief. As everyone attended quite a few of the cattle call events and was pleased to see the amount of community participation and community building. That was, the Mariachi Festival was pretty spectacular to see the amount of people out there. Enjoyed the rodeo a couple times. I attended the Ivy Joint Chambers Mixer briefly, and the Los Cabos grand opening, and that was nice to see that open, and I think they hit it right on target right before cattle call. I got to participate in a tree planting event this past weekend at Hinojosa Park, and that was pretty cool. It was neat to see the high school kids come out and help out, and some other council members there and city staff, and it was well done, and people enjoyed the time there and the camaraderie. And then I got to step in for a little bit at Witter School for a beautification project there the same day. Figured I was out and about. I was already sweaty, might as well make good use of that. I got to speak to some kids at Hidalgo School for Career Day last Friday. There were other people there to speak, some of which were like firefighters, dentists, that kind of stuff. They had cool props to give to the kids. I had a council agenda, a budget workbook. I passed it around and asked the kids to help me out. What cuts are we going to make this year, kids? There was crying and that kind of stuff. No, I'm kidding. That did not happen. It turned into kind of a Q&A free-for-all, and kids just asked me a lot of questions, but that was a neat event. And one thing that I did focus on was volunteering, volunteer projects to help improve the city. And mentioned today in the Parks and Rec meeting, as we talked about the Boys and Girls Club and how they promote volunteerism. And I read an article about how volunteering actually improves mental health, and with mental health issues on the rise, depression and anxiety and that kind of stuff, seems like the more we can do to volunteer for our communities, the better off we are, and the same with our youth. So that's one of the points I made to the kids at Hidalgo, was that if you have any inclination toward community involvement or toward working for the city or becoming a council member, that it's a good place to start with volunteerism and community involvement that way. I got to attend a planning commission meeting Wednesday night, and let's see. I think some of us attended the aquatic center opening, but we may have talked about that briefly at the last council meeting. We've kind of foregone our council member reports for the last few meetings because they've been marathons,
meetings.
and special meetings. So anyway, like this one, Gordon says.
Like this one. This one, Gordon says.
Anyway, I just want to thank all of the departments for working so hard on putting together some recommendations for this very difficult time. City finance is different than personal finance, but there are some parallels, and at home, when I'm not making enough money, we have to cut costs or figure out how to make more money, and that's kind of where we're at here. So as George said, we don't take any of it lightly. It hurts us to make the cuts when we know that it's going to affect individual employees, and we would love to see money flowing in and being able to keep all those positions open and filled. But this is as you know, we're in a difficult situation. So thank you for your grace and your patience, and for all your help getting it put together. That's it for my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamby. Councilmember Couchman.
Okay, I attended the Los Cabos grand opening. I've probably forgotten some of the things that I attended prior to, for the last 3 or 4 weeks, but I did the tree planting at Hinojosa Park with some of the other council members. I would like to give a shout out to the Interact Club, which is the students that came out to help us, and they are sponsored by Rotary International, and so we do that from our local Brawley Club, and they came out to help us plant, and they were a great group of kids. Just give a shout out to them. I attended Chili Cook-Off, the Cattle Call Mixer, the Cowboy Poetry, the Mariachi Festival, the Sophomore Cowbells Barbecue Cook-Off, or the tri-tip dinner anyway, the Rodeo Committee Dinner, the parade, the Casas Barbecue at Tom DeBosa's house, the Stockman's Club Dance and Inferno also, the Rodeo Sunday, the Elks Barbecue, the library board meeting as a stand-in for Luke, and also I attended a local resident, our prior resident, Becky Flaming's funeral services, and also had a stress test during all that time period. So that was, if that wasn't enough of a stress test.
You also went to Too Short and Warren G, didn't you?
No, I didn't make that, but I saw your picture in it. So I didn't make that one, but I attended almost everything else, and I was all over town. And I appreciate everybody's effort on part of the city. I think all the events came off pretty well, you know. I mean, there were only a few little altercations, I think, that happened out there. Appreciate the police department, fire department being out there, and all the other people from Parks and Rec and roads and everything else that makes that cattle call a beautiful thing. So, and I think it was a great cattle call this year, and looking forward to it next year. And so thank you, and that's my report.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Couchman. Councilmember Nava.
I'll just keep it really short. Tree planting event this past weekend was great. Do want to thank Parks and Rec staff for being out there. They did a very, very good job in helping us. Sam did attend as well. I'm not sure if you planted any trees, Sam, but you know he was there.
I did
certainly.
a few.
He showed up and he left cleaner than when you got there.
I was there for moral support.
But you know, it's. Also attended the ICTC meeting on behalf of the City Council, and I did attend IVDC's 15th annual meeting the other day as well. A few other things that I've done, of course, since then, but I do want to thank staff. I know this is a difficult time for everybody, for council included, and I know I've talked to many of you personally about, just the upcoming decisions we have to make, and you've expressed your, I wouldn't say frustration, but I think it's more than anything, it's just, sadness and just knowledge that these are tough decisions for us. So I do want to thank you all for the work that you're doing, for the work that you do. And I have, again, a very sincere, very, very sincere calling for all of you. If you have ideas on ways to cut cost that we may not be aware of, please don't hesitate to share that. My door's always open, my phone is always on, and you can reach out, and it's always in full confidence. I've had very private discussions with many members of staff here in the city of Brawley, and I never breached that trust. So just, feel free to express your thoughts, even if it's just a vent, but if you have ways that can help us make better decisions here, please let me know. So open invitation, please don't take that lightly. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Nava, for that. Our Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, yeah, it's been a while since we reported, but I won't go into every event that I attended for Cattle Call because it just goes on and on. But I do have to say that I was impressed with all the events. I think all the events went really well. We enjoyed them. This is the first year that I did attend the Cowboy Poetry, and I actually thought it was quite a bit of fun also, so I plan to continue to attend that. In between or before or after, I'm not sure when it was, I did attend on behalf of the city in Mayor Wharton's absence. I had the privilege of presenting a proclamation to Andrea Rourke, who retired from the Imperial Valley Housing Authority, or is retiring actually at the end of the year. And she had a very nice luncheon out there at the at the Del Rio Country Club. And then I also, since I'm talking about proclamations, I had the honor of representing our mayor today for the service of John Santos, who was a police officer, he was a police chief, and he was a council member and mayor with a career of 33 years with the city of Brawley. And I actually remember my mom talking about him, you know, and he had a nickname, Chilado. And I remember my mom either asked for advice or concerns, and so it was a name that was well known here in Brawley. And I happened to have graduated from high school with one of his sons, so it was a nice opportunity for me to reconnect with him and talk about things that we've missed each other on. He actually lives in Oregon now, but he comes to Brawley quite often. And so that was a very nice event, just happened today. And aside from that, I've attended I didn't make the tree planting because I did had an invitation to do a presentation for at Imperial Valley College on a women's empowerment conference that was very well attended by a lot of young people and women in the community. That my particular subject was women in politics, so they wanted to know if that was a good path to take, and I encouraged them and made it sound like it's a lot of fun. I didn't talk about any of the, I mean, I kept it very positive, that's for sure. So I was surprised at how many people were actually interested in pursuing that. I did tell them, forewarn them that if they did decide to pursue it, they have to allow a lot of time to spend on politics in their community. And aside from that, I just want to also thank and recognize all the staff that worked so hard during the cattle call season. I mean, I saw them out there early, late, midday. I don't know how you did all that work, and including Rosanna, who I told her, Rosanna, I don't know that that's really a duty as other duties as assigned, but she was there helping all the staff and making sure that everything was done. And also, of course, all the department heads for all the work you do, and especially right now that we're going through this budget cycle, I think it's very stressful for many of us. And like George said and offered, if you need to talk to any of us, we're open to it. Give us a call, or we can make an appointment to meet. So, thank you so much.
You sent your surrogate, Julio, to help us with the trees, though.
Well, actually, he's on Parks and Rec Commission.
That's right,
so
he did come.
That was his
That's
duty
right.
to do.
He was there. He was there.
Yeah, and he's always pleased to participate.
He did some work.
Actually, I have to share this just because he said that. I was out of town for 1 week on county business, and we had to leave on the day, I think it's last meeting, we had to leave on the day of the meeting, and he was so upset because he said he had a perfect attendance record.
He did.
And I made him miss his meeting. So he swore he'll never miss another one. So anyway, he really enjoys Parks and Rec. Thank you. Thank you, Donnie.
Mr.
Thank
Mayor,
you.
Mr. Mayor, just for the record, Chilado means squeaky, in case you didn't know.
Oh, yeah. I didn't hear too much laughter, so I figured it was tame. That's fantastic, and thank you for that, Mayor Pro Tem. Mine is just, I attended just about most of the cattle call events, but one I want to highlight is in attendance at the Cattle Call Committee Appreciation Dinner. Miguel from Parks and Recs was specifically singled out for his efforts. I'm sure there's a team behind you. Are you wearing the belt buckle? That's all I want to know. Have you worn the belt buckle? So he was presented a belt buckle.
wearing spurs, too.
It was very, very nice. So just wanted to point that out. The only other couple things is Pioneers Museum. I actually attended, and it was very well attended, Valley-wide. California Women for Ag chapter has been launched in Imperial County. Sam, of course, you're being a big proponent of the museum, but I don't know about the woman in Ag. Yeah,
My wife.
we're all supportive, of course. Yeah, mine as well. And the inaugural president is Natalie Peraza. So
Yes.
pretty exciting. And the state, we had some state representatives there. Outside of that, again, tremendous job on the part of staff, obviously, as we just singled out Miguel, but I think it's often not said or really recognized or not. I know sponsors are recognized. I know there's tireless work on the part of the chamber, but certainly Cattle Call and all these events we talk about would not happen without the staff, in many cases, working around the clock. So I'm truly appreciated, and it was a it was just a fantastic year, I think, again, of all the cattle call events. So with that said, I think enough was said on the budget. Our commitment, I think, as the designated committee now is continue to roll up our sleeves, do everything we can to mitigate some of the displeasurable components of the budget discussion, but really look at every single thing that I know that's already been considered, but for us to understand it and our commitments to bring that back and do everything we can to move forward as prosperously as possible with the given situation. So with that said, I'll move on to the city manager's report.
Thank you. We are hoping to bring back the Interact Club as well as a number of participants who supported Saturday's Hinojosa tree planting event. Perhaps the next meeting or subsequent to that, we'll invite our community members to come in and be recognized for their service. Also wanted to note that I did receive a phone call from our community member today about the rattlesnake situation out on Pano, and I have reached out to Pioneers Memorial Healthcare District to see what we can do together to do some proactive education and messaging. I was able to connect with the CEO right before I walked into the council meeting, so he's headed back into town this evening, and I hope to connect with him tomorrow so we can strategize. We've also had an opportunity to make our way through 2 parks that abut the New River and be sure that the signage is still in play. A couple of years ago, we actually installed an education piece to point out what, a poisonous snake is versus a non-poisonous, and kind of be sure we were doing our best to raise awareness. I haven't had an opportunity yet to talk with staff about the idea of placement of additional signage on poles that are in place on Pano that already have no parking signs. So I'll be exploring that with staff to see if we can jump on to those polls and perhaps continue to raise awareness. And I'll also take a look at how, I'm not familiar with our city laying any material down to deter snakes, material from the point of view, I guess, of creating barriers or poisons. So I do need to spend some time taking a look at that with animal control and our public works director. And
It's hard to control that, though.
Yes,
I mean, it's just
I
a
don't-
long span. I mean, how do you even do that?
You've
So-
got a lot of.
And
you've
how do
got
you
a
prevent
lot
other
of-
animals
We're in their
from-
territory. It's
right.
not like,
Yeah.
You've got a lot of river bottom
Yeah.
area
Yeah.
that butts on residential, and I don't think we could do that. I mean, you have to be aware of that when you're close to the river bottom. I mean, it's there. Skunks,
Wanted to
snake,
also note that
everything.
I have fielded some community concerns and interest about the post office renaming. And after having the opportunity to touch base with Congressman Vargas's office, I now have a manner in which I'll be redirecting comments either in support or just an interest in weighing in on the topic to the congressman's office. That particular act of naming a federal building is in the form of a piece of legislation that's been introduced. It's a 2-year bill, so it hasn't been taken up yet, but it sounds like it has potential to move in the future. There's definitely a perception that the city advocated for renaming. I did revisit with the staff of Congressman Vargas's office that our last contact was about a year ago. And at that time, a different name was being considered, and I did provide an update on some efforts inside of the city regarding one of our parks to honor the memory of that individual. Wanted to also note that we recently received notice of resignation from Andrew Colas as a member of the Parks and Rec Commission body, and we, as he has moved out of county and out of state, I will be following up with Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem on what process you would like us to employ, whether it's reviving or bringing back for discussion purposes the former list that was prepared, or if you want another solicitation, however you wish as mayor or incoming mayor, to take that on. And with that, that's all I've got to report at this time.
Thank you. Very good, city attorney's report. What do you think?
So, council's already aware, but now it's firm enough that it can be made public that the mobile home park litigation has settled. The remaining trailers will be removed shortly. I think the only thing they're arguing about is when. Some of the people say they need to recover stuff out of them.
What stuff?
There's a
I
desire
actually
to
saw
remove
somebody actually taking stuff out.
appliances.
Yeah.
So my conversation last night with the new owner suggests 2 to 4 weeks with a heavy emphasis on 2.
2 to 4 weeks.
And they can move it out by
They
tomorrow.
can take that stuff out overnight.
Yeah.
You don't
I understand.
You don't understand. I don't
No,
think.
he does, he does.
I think we don't.
Jeez.
But anyway, the end is in sight.
Yeah, they always
It's been
do.
such a drag that
It's just been a
I
terrible.
did see somebody actually park there and they were taking stuff out, so maybe it's a process. Thank you for that good news.
got us into that whole.
No,
I
don't
won't
mention,
even go there.
don't mention.
Anything
It's a
else?
bad thing.
Very good, city clerk. Okay, very good. We will now take a brief break. We're going to move to closed session. Thank you, everyone, for a long meeting.